Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we are live.
Thank you, Clerk McIntosh. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting of November 13th, 2023. I'd like to call actually, we can't call the meeting to order because we don't have quorum, correct? So we're just going to wait until the quorum is present, and then I will formally call the meeting to order.
I will let you know when we have quorum. Councillors McMeekin and Councillor Taddison just walked in the room, so we have quorum.
Thank you. So I'd like to call the meeting of this Public Works Committee for November 13th officially to order. Reminder that all electronic devices will be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Please note that quorum is present. My understanding is that in chambers, we have Councillor Taddison, Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Beatty, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Huang, Councillor Crutch, Councillor A. Wilson, and Councillor M. Wilson. And joining me virtually, I guess it's just me.
Sorry, Chair Nan, Councillor Paul's just walked into the room as well.
Thank you. And we also have Councillor Pauls. So quorum is present, and I will be requesting that everybody please do use eScribe. So make sure that you are formally logged in and able to indicate that way. Otherwise, I won't be able to see you in the room. I only have virtual eyes today. So with that, Elsie McIntosh, if you could please, are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Nan, the following changes were made to the agenda. Item number 5, communications, correspondence from Natalie Feigstauer and Gerald Tetro respecting item 10.1 Safari Road petition for drainage works, request for full engineer's report, PW 2207A, Ward 13. Discussion items, item 11.5, Accessible Transit Services Review Committee, Report 23-001, June 29, 2023. Notices of motion, Remembrance Day crosswalk design for the Stony Creek Salt Fleet Memorial and at other memorial locations in the city. Item 13.2, funding of water service installation for a community garden located at 200 Jones Road, Stony Creek. And as I was reading this out, Councillor Jackson walked into the room.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Jackson. I'd also like to note as chair that we did have a change to the outstanding business list. Committee members, you might recall that on the docket initially for this meeting today was going to be the implementation plan for the two-way conversion of Main Street, as well as the reassessment of all one-way streets. It's my understanding that that report is now coming on December 4th. And if we could please formally make sure that that gets recognized on the public agenda as an outstanding business list item amendment today, I would appreciate it. So with all that, may I please get a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as noted by the clerk and the changes that I just identified. Moved by Councillor Taddison. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor A. Wilson. Any discussion on the agenda as amended? Seeing none, it's before committee to vote to approve.
Chair Nan, that carries.
Thank you. Next up is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Either disqualifying or non-disqualifying that council members would like, or committee members would like to identify? Seeing none that are being flagged for me, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on October 30th, 2023. Could I please have a mover and seconder to put the minutes on the table? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor McMeekin. Thank you both. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, it's before committee for approval.
Chair Nan, that carries.
Thank you. On to communications item. First up is 5.1, correspondence from Natalie Feisthauser, Hauer and Gerald Tetrault respecting item 10.1, Safari Road, petition for drainage works request for full engineers report PW 22070A, Ward 13. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive this communication item and refer it for consideration for item 10.1? Moved by, did I see Councillor Cassar's hand? And seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you both. Any discussion? Seeing none, then it's before committee for electronic vote.
Chair Nan,
Discussion,
Councillor
Councillor A.
Alex Wilson
Wilson.
had his hand up.
Thanks, and through you, Chair, just an acknowledgement, thanks for the letter, for drawing committee's attention to it. I think that's a good document to have open. There's not quite 41 questions in there, but there are quite a number of questions. We'll be going through them as we get to the public hearing later. Just wanted to acknowledge that we got those and make sure committee's eyes are on it. That is correspondence we'll be referring to later today.
Thank you for that, Councillor. So it's been moved and seconded and before committee for electronic vote.
Chair Nan, that item carries.
Thank you. On to delegation requests. We have several in front of committee for approval today. 6.1 is delegation requests respecting 10.1 Safari Road petition for the drainage works request as previously identified. First up is John Fitzgerald, followed by Tina Osborne, Paul Osborne, Natalie Feisthauser, as well as Akeem Klaus. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation requests for today's meeting? Really difficult for me to see, so I'm just going to rely on clerks to identify a mover and seconder, please.
Councillor Alex Wilson and Councillor Esther Pauls.
Thank you both. Any discussion on the delegation requests today? Seeing none, it's before committee for approving.
Chair Nan, Councillor Danko is in the room.
That carries. On to public hearings. First up is 10.1 Safari Road petition for drainage works requested for full engineer's report PW 22070A in Ward 13. Members of committee, item 10.1 is with respect to the drainage issues involving Safari Road. Council of the Municipality of the City of Hamilton has appointed the engineering firm of Robinson's Consultants as represented by Mr. Lauren Franklin to prepare a preliminary report under Section 10.1 of the Drainage Act and in accordance with Section 10, subsection 2 of the Drainage Act, affected landowners, public utilities, road authorities, conservation authority, Minister of Natural Resources and Minister of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs were notified about the opportunity to attend a meeting to consider the preliminary report. And therefore, I'd ask if there's anyone present who wishes to come forward to please print your name, address, and telephone number on a sheet provided and submit that to the clerks. Thank you. So we do have registered speakers as we've just approved. And there are 5 pre-registered in-person delegations. Committee members are reminded that questions of the delegations are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. And we will hear all of the delegations and then vote to receive them in totality. To the delegates who are in the room who will be speaking to us shortly, you have 5 minutes in total for your delegation. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell indicating to you that you have about a minute left. So first up, we have this afternoon, John Fitzgerald. If you could make your way down to the podium and the microphone.
Does the light have to go on? Okay. Hi, I'm John Fitzgerald. I live at 1727 Safari Road. I'm probably one of the junior ones in the neighborhood, not the most junior, but one of the junior residents. Most of them have been there for like 40 years plus. Thank you for letting me speak here today. I know you're all busy. You got other things on mind, more important issues, meetings, running the city, and of course the Grey Cup, which is coming to Hamilton. But if I could try to bring you back to the Safari Road perspective, it would be greatly appreciated. We've had a number of problems up there, and I'm not here to speak for the community. I'm here to speak for myself, but I'm speaking on observations of the community. Is that a lot of them are becoming very disheartened because we had a lot of problems up there. We had a lot of promises from city council in the past, which really never came to fruition. So we're kind of somewhat standoffish with this whole process, but bear with me. So we have an ongoing issue that's been going on for a number of years now, and that's with flooding. And I want to assure you that my understanding of the report is we're not putting in something new. We're actually going to put the water back where it used to go. We have a problem with where some culverts were filled in, some land was filled in, all under the guise of City of Hamilton allowing some fill to come in, and GRCA allowing some fill to come in, and now they have a lot of fill similar to what's going on 97, in my mind. Okay, so because of that, we have an issue with I'm not here to point fingers, but I have to say this, with one person filling in some area that restricts the water from flowing its natural course. And what we were here today is to ask you, and asking you to unanimously support, is the progression of this next step and getting this underway. Right now, my granddaughter can't get a school bus. She has to get in a car and drive. That's an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience that I can't get mail, another inconvenience. But now we have the road blocked off, and the quickest route for the fire department is up Safari Road, but now they have to go and jog around. Same thing with an ambulance. The police, it's a crapshoot. So we'll say 50% of the time they might get the right way. So now we have a safety issue. All right, we need to get this whole issue resolved. So as I said, it's been ongoing for a few years. We didn't know the problem of it until the city started investigating the problem. It came to our attention when they were outside one day flying drones, and we discovered that the natural, and again I'm stressing natural water flow path had been interrupted. This has caused a lot of damage. I had to get my driveway topped up 3 times, and yet it's still underwater at certain times of the year. This has never happened before. Now, as I said, I've only been there 20 years. It's never happened before I was there. But my neighbors who've been there for 40 plus years says it's never happened, and their fields are getting flooded as well. Again, I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking on observation. Okay. So There's a lot of problems. I have a lot of car problems, a lot of bearings going wrong because I have to drive through water. I have a lot of repairs to make. Not to mention commerce. You know, African Lion Safari had to make up their own little sign saying, hey, we're still open. Hang a left, go up Valence Road, right? So there's commerce being interrupted here as well. Not to mention Christmas tree farms. There's a lot of Christmas tree farms in the area that count on Safari Road because it brings a lot of mean traffic. Now that's being dispersed over to Highway 8 usually, and because of that, they're not getting the business. As I said before, I touched on the fact that the feeling of the local community is not very high with the city, but not just the city, the Ministry of the Environment. There's contaminated soil on the property, and all this has compounded that problem, right? Bringing in more fill, not just the flooding, it's compounding a lot of problems. And the reason I bring this up, I know it's not part of this mandate, is to show you that we're feeling a little concerned about city making actually doing something. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Again, I just want to reiterate, it's not finding an alternate route. This is the route the water has normally passed through in the past until it was filled in. And you're going to have people coming up and saying, we don't want to be flooded out. Well, this is the way that water naturally flowed before. And we're just asking that the water be put back to where it belonged.
Thank you, Delegate Fitzgerald. That brings you to your time. First, but hang on. You do have some questions. The way that this works is that committee members have an opportunity to engage with you and any other delegate here. So first up on the speakers list, we have Councillor A. Wilson.
I guess afternoon now, John. Good afternoon, John, and thank you for coming here today. I'm just going to ask some questions to clarify, make sure that I got the questions you were asking of committee and of the staff report correct, and then when we get to the staff presentation, I'll ask those questions later. So just so you understand, I'll take those questions forward. Some of the things that I heard today was that this has had an impact on you personally, from not being able to get mail, not being able to get the school bus for your children, emergency service delays, and you've done some driveway work yourself already. Are there other kind of personal impacts that you want committee to be aware of?
Well, I'm not, I don't, again, I said I'm not speaking for the committee, but if that's affected me, it's probably affected others. So there is an effect. Is it affect or effect?
Yeah, thank you, and both are fine with me.
Okay.
And I guess my follow-up question is then, one of the main asks that I heard from you today is that we move forward with the engineer's report, move forward with this drainage process. And so just to clarify, are you supportive of the recommendation that's being put forward then? You've kind of talked about the different routes, just clarifying you're supportive of the report, you want us to move forward is the key?
Yes, move forward with it. I think that it's important that we get this resolved.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, but I will ask some of the questions you asked later on to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next up, we have Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair Nan. And Mr. Fitzgerald, just a question, since I'm not as familiar with your area up there in the Flamborough community and Dundas, upper part of Dundas into the Flamborough community. Are you next to and adjacent to the infamous Waterdown Gardens supply property? I'm not asking you to get into the legalities of that issue, but I'm just trying to understand the geography. Is part and parcel, or this is an entirely distant from that particular issue? Through you, Chair Nan, please. Mr. Fitzgerald, please.
Okay. I don't know about whether he was called the garden thing, but if you Google Ontario's largest chop shop, you'll have him come up.
Okay, and you're adjacent to or nearby?
Adjacent to him. I've had him as a pleasure of being a neighbor for 20 years, yeah.
I caught the sarcasm. Thanks, Mr. Fitzgerald. Right. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor. And next up we have Councillor McMeekin.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
I'm not so sure you're going to say that. Thank you.
It's always good to see you. And the so I think Alex asked the question, sorry, Councillor Wilson asked the question that I had in mind. Although I was interested to hear about the Christmas tree farms potentially being in trouble That, for members of council who don't know, that's one of the 4 things Flamborough is famous for on a per capita basis. The Flamborough area has more Christmas tree farms than anywhere else in the province. But I understood, I think from your answer to Councillor Wilson, that the recommendation that's being made today is acceptable to you and desirable to you.
I would like to see unanimous support for it is what I would like to see.
Fantastic.
Councillor McMeekin. And that next up, we have Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. And I'm like Councillor Jackson. I don't live in that area, but I'm intrigued. You said something that the infill that they're doing, it stops the natural waterfall. How many years has been doing? Is it just you lived there 20 years and now this is the first time?
It came to our attention, as I said, when the city was investigating with their drone on the property, that was the reason. Originally, I thought it might be because they put a gas line in, it might interfere with the aquifers, or that we have global warming going on and all that other stuff. I didn't piece together that the fill was being used to fill in the waterway.
Okay.
So,
and when did the city do the drone? I'm not aware.
just a little. They first started investigating just a little shy of 2 years.
2 years. So you've been living with this for 2 years.
Living with this for more than 2 years.
And
It's 2 years ago is when it came to my attention that it's because of the landfill that's been brought in. And we're not talking a dump truck full. We're talking thousands of loads of dump trucks. We're talking loads. So it's not just, he dumped a couple dump truck loads full. There's quite a bit.
So it's good now we know the root cause. Before we, I guess, did not know what was happening.
Right,
So,
and the report kind of skates all this stuff that I'm telling you. I'm giving you a little bit of the back history. And as I think it's Councillor Jackson, I can't see from here. Yeah, alluded to that there is an infamous neighbor up there, yes.
Right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that does exhaust our speakers. Thank you so much for delegating Delegate Fitzgerald. You can go and take your seat now. And at this point, I would like to call Tina Osborne to the mic. Tina, a reminder for you as well. You do have 5 minutes in total. And at the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell, and that indicates for you that you have a minute remaining.
Good afternoon, Chair Nan and members of the Public Works Committee. My name is Tina Osborne. I live on Kirkwall Road. My family has owned the farm on Kirkwall Road from Safari Road to the 6th concession for over 60 years. So I'm well versed in the water levels in the surrounding area, especially the creek that runs under Kirkwall Road. I've played in that creek since I was a child, building dams when there was water in it and running along the bedrock when it was dry. In fact, it runs right behind my house. After reading the preliminary engineer's report and the August 10th Safari Road petition for drainage works and the engineer report, I have 2 main concerns. First is the environmental impacts of the proposed work in the provincially significant wetland, and secondly is the potential for downstream flooding around my property. Regarding the first concern, point 3 on the engineer's report states that no alternative solutions have been given consideration. So with regards to the PSW, I ask you to consider this alternative solution. Instead of opting for a large project to drain the wetland, I propose a more non-invasive approach to start. Since the culverts that cross the 3 driveways on Safari Road are considered to be in poor condition, not of proper size and/or missing, the city should start by installing appropriately sized culverts, keep the road closed for at least another year or 2, then reassess and see if the water is more evenly dispersed. The road has been closed this long, so it's another year. In fact, why can't Safari Road be permanently closed? According to the August 10th, 2022 Safari Road petition report, Engineering Services is undertaking a class environmental assessment associated with reconstructing Safari Road and the anticipated upgrade of road cross culverts. This EA is expected to be completed in 2024, with road reconstruction currently budgeted for 2026. At this point, Safari Road will have been closed for approximately 5 years, so why not just permanently close it? By that time, motorists will be completely used to driving around it. Precedence has been set elsewhere in the city, such as Middletown Road, for example. Truck routes should be amended regardless to be on main roads instead of going through these environmentally sensitive areas. Traffic going through this area is a detriment to the nesting and breeding grounds of many threatened species. I've seen firsthand how this area has thrived in the past few years with the road closure. The abundance of wildlife is quite spectacular, and naturists are often seen stopped here. This is an opportunity for the city to strengthen the PSW. Now more than ever, we need to embrace any chance we can to establish breeding grounds for species at risk and strengthen migratory stops for birds. I would also like to point out that this report states historical flooding of this low-lying segment of roadway and surrounding area has been an issue that has required road closures in the past to maintain public safety. Of the 30 years that I've lived there, it's only been the last 3 years that we have really seen the extensive flooding along Safari Road. 3 years is not historical, it's recent. What's also recent is that there has been an extremely large amount of dirt that was dumped in the drainage area on one of the properties on Safari Road. I'm not sure why this was not mentioned in the engineer's report. I'm curious as to why they are blaming the blockages on beaver dams and not this change to the land itself, when it is so obvious just by looking at satellite images on Google Maps. How can they see a beaver dam but not truckloads upon truckloads of dumped soil in a wetland? To address my second concern, if you are moving the water from Safari Road to Kirkwall Road, will it cause flooding around the properties on Kirkwall Road where the culvert terminates? And if so, then what? What kind of guarantees will the city make regarding potential flooding around my property after they have all the blockages on Safari Road opened? My creek is very small. It's a seasonal creek. It's not some huge tributary of Fairchild Creek. It is not capable of handling large amounts of water. To reiterate what the GRCA recommends, before making any decisions, please ensure that hydrologic and hydraulic models be created to assess potential downstream floodplain impacts. If they are concerned, so am I. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Delegate Osborne. If you hang on, we do have a speakers list, starting with Councillor A. Wilson, please.
Thank you, Tina. And again, thank you for coming out, sharing your concerns today and being a part of this process. Similar as to the last, just going to ask some clarifying questions, make sure I have the right list of questions I'll carry forward to the next part of this discussion, if that's all right with you. So some of the things I heard from you, just seeking confirmation, the two big concerns being what are the potential environmental impacts to the provincially significant wetland, as well as the potential downstream impacts to flooding. Can ask the question about flooding very specifically. What was the area that you were said if we reroute the creek from Safari to, was it Kirkwall that you said? I just want to make sure I'm asking specifically about the area you were concerned about downstream.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Kirkwall. And then further to that, one of the suggestions you proposed for managing the environmental impacts is a slower approach, focusing on 3 culverts, doing a bit more of a wait and see, following up on hydrological modeling as well. So that's point 2. And then the third question, and I think this has been raised from other folks with a variety of perspectives, is the use of historic flooding in the engineer's report, as well as a bit more of a follow-up on the cause of the flooding as identified in the engineer's report versus local residents' understanding of the cause of the flooding.
Through the chair, that is correct as well.
Thank you. Happy to get follow-up on those 3 areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And if nobody else indicated on the speakers list, so thank you again, Delegate Osborne. You may have your seat. Next up, we have Paul Osborne. Please make your way to the microphone, and a reminder to you that you have 5 minutes in total. The 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell indicating that you have a minute left to speak.
Chair and members of the Public Works Committee. My name is Paul Osborne. I'm a resident on a property downstream from where the flooding occurs on Safari Road. I have lived in this area for almost 30 years and have been a volunteer firefighter in Rockton for 20 of those years. As a first responder for Hamilton Fire Department, our station, 27, was notified of road closures on Safari Road between Valens Road and roughly 1 kilometre east of Kirkwall Road. This has only occurred in the last 2.5 to 3 years of my 20 years as a volunteer firefighter. We're briefed regularly on road closures in our primary response area, and as are other stations that may have to respond to our station's PRA. Do you need me for something? I'll pull it up, yeah. Where was I? Initially, Safari Road was an area where water would breach the culverts and flood the road for a couple of days, so the road remained open and signage was placed in the area where flooding mainly occurred. This was usually in the spring or after heavy rainfall throughout the year. It's only been in these last couple of years that the road has flooded and remained closed indefinitely. As a first responder, we constantly must adjust our routes to respond to our calls. Our motto is adapt and overcome. Granted, there are some properties affected by this closure. Some have access to proceed, so we have to access by proceeding north on Kirkwall Road and turning east on Safari. Others we have to proceed north on Valens Road, then turn west on Safari. I see no discernible difference in time that would impact the outcome of a call using either route if this road were to remain closed either indefinitely or permanently. On a personal level, I think the engineer's proposal is rather harsh and not well thought out. I think this flooding has more to do with some residents in the area taking it upon themselves to change the course of the water flow by dumping fill on their properties, thereby impacting the natural course of the water flooding, causing flooding, sorry. I know 3 properties within 2 kilometers of the flooding where this has occurred. We have dump trucks traversing Kirkwall Road on a regular basis, bringing fill into our area. And as you well know, this is not a rare occurrence in Flamborough. We've brought numerous concerns to the GRCA and the city regarding fill in the wetlands. I've walked our property with a representative from the GRCA and pointed out the mounds of fill dumped into the swampy area on an adjacent property. I still see dump trucks and mud all over the road, evidence that this is still occurring. We have a seasonal creek on our property that usually dries up by mid-June. This year was the first year since moving here that the creek did not dry up. The engineer wants to dig drainage ditches to drain the flooding on Safari Road, but how will this approach impact residents downstream? Excuse me. All this proposal does is move the problem somewhere else. Yes, climate change can and does impact groundwater levels, as we are witnessing, but if we plug up the natural drainage channels with loads of fill brought in from God knows where, we are not helping nature, in my opinion. This needs to be investigated and brought to a halt, and any remediation needs to be built back to the perpetrators. Remember, water always wins. So on your screen, the area in question, and you can see from, this is a 2023 satellite image, and you can see all the fill that's being brought in and dozed and leveled out. And then if you go back to the report, which you may or may not have in front of you, where the wetlands are, this area is in that natural flow. Okay, and I think Mr. Fitzgerald, was alluding to this as well. This is a problem area. And this is continuing to happen to this day. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out, Paul, and sharing both your experience as a resident and as a volunteer firefighter on the ground, helping add some of that context. Again, just doing the same thing we've seen twice now. One of the things I heard you say in your report was that believe that fill is the issue and that the engineer's report is harsh when it comes to, or the recommended solution is harsh. Could you just elaborate on what are some of your concerns with recommendation within the engineer's report, and what are some of the solutions you'd like to see?
Yes, through the chair. My concern is if they drain that wetland, it's going to have an impact on the natural environment. It's going to, where's the water going to go? How's it going to impact people downstream from it? Right? We're just moving the problem from one place to another. This hasn't been a problem for 50, 60, 70 years. Whenever Valens was designed to absorb the Beverly Swamp, it's only been in the last 2.5 to 3 years where we're now seeing flooding in our areas because of changes that have been made to the topography. So we need to stop that.
Thank you. Again, Paul, and something we've struggled with a lot as an office is what to do when you're getting those dumping calls, as I think we've seen on the Regional Road 97. Like, eventually it can escalate to the courts, and that can get quite intensive. When you and neighbors are seeing those trucks and don't believe there's a permit right now, are you getting in touch with Hamilton bylaw, getting that, or you've just tried for so many years and maybe there hasn't been that? So I guess, what does that reporting recommendation look like for right now when you see those trucks coming in and you're worried that they may not have a permit to be dumping?
So again, through the chair, we have contacted the GRCI in the past. Like I said, I physically walked the representative from the GRCI through our property, showed them the physical mounds of dirt. I think I still have some drone footage. On this particular property that I had up on the screen, I don't have drone footage of that. I went there this morning because I was going to bring some with me, but it was too windy. The drone was getting blown around all over the place. But you can see clearly from the satellite imagery that it is there.
Thank you. And through the chair, just one final follow-up. And you're seeing that on an ongoing basis. I think I heard in your delegation you're still seeing trucks in the area that you presume are dumping. What does that frequency, or what does that look like, say, in the past 12 months? What have you been noticing?
So through the chair, still seeing it, not as frequent these days, more so in summer weather and stuff. Again, tracks of mud down the roads that they're tracking mud in and out as they deliver their loads. I was out of town for the last week, so I can't say within the last week, but I'd say frequency-wise, probably about 6 dump trucks a day that I would see, and that's coming past our place. We don't see what the other gentleman sees.
Thank you, Paul, for coming out and for sharing your perspective. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next up, we have Councillor Jackson, followed by Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Paul, good seeing you again, and thanks for
Good to see you too, sir.
all your past work as a volunteer firefighter and with transit as well that I'm familiar with.
Thank you.
So can I just understand, it seems that the three of you so far delegating have spoken to a drastic remedy of closure of Safari Road, and whenever I've been involved in any form of closure in my ward, rare, but it's happened, it's you need to see any potential downsides. You see more upsides to the hypothetical closure of Safari versus any downsides through you, Chair Nan. If you can maybe elaborate on that, Paul, why you think it's good, but is there any potential negativity to cul-de-sacing or closing your portion of Safari, please?
Through the chair. I'm not on Safari Road, Councillor Jackson.
Okay.
So I don't see what the other gentleman sees. Like, it's impacting him being closed.
Okay.
But as long as that water problem exists, we're not going to be able to open Safari Road. There are natural benefits to leaving Safari Road closed. Like, it is, the wildlife is thriving out there now. We have trumpeter swans, we have all kinds of birds. We have people coming for bird watching, and I mean, it's an active area. But again, I don't see the negative sides because I don't have a child that I have to drive to school on a bus, or they can't make a bus and stuff like that. So there are detriments that I don't see that he sees. I see the positives where, if we want to bring wildlife back to the areas, then yeah, by all means, please keep it closed. Sorry, but I mean, the engineer's report where they want to go in and drain that entire area is going to decimate wildlife in that area. So, I mean, if the first approach should be something like fixing those culverts, trying to get that water back into its natural flow. Like I said, water always wins. You may win the battle, but you're not going to win the war, right? So water will always win. We need to go back to where those culverts were in a state where they could handle or accommodate the amount of water that's in that area. Yeah, we get some more rainflows than we used to get, but when you impinge the flow of water with damaged culverts or filled-in culverts or landfill, you're going to change like that whole floodplain now. It wasn't designed for that.
And Paul, just to chime in, just supplementary, Paul, just to be crystal clear, I've heard clearly this is a 2 to 3 year escalating problem. For many years, people lived in that vicinity or on the road, and it's all because of all this extraordinary amount of dumping and fill that has been dumped on properties in the vicinity. Through you, Chair Nan, is that what's happened? And I'm going to have some questions for staff as to why that's been allowed to happen. That's changed water courses and things like that, Paul. That's my last question.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, within the last 2.5 to 3 years, with the amount of dumping that's gone on in that area, specifically that area, that's what's caused that much flooding on Safari Road. The gentleman prior alluded to somebody up there, Ontario's biggest chop shop. Our groundwater was contaminated at one point because of the amount of cars that were being stolen, filtered through his place, through the reserve, and going to Quebec. So we all had to have our water tested. So this guy doesn't really have any regard, and I'm not going to say his name, but he has no regard for the environment. He doesn't care. And so by him taking, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have dockets for these things. I'm pretty sure he's taking loads of dirt in and just dumping it and leveling it out.
Thank you, Councillor.
Appreciate the genuineness of your response. Sorry, Chair Nan, somebody cut me off without me being able to say thank you to the delegate for his answers to my question. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair Nan.
Good to see you again.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Danko.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand if the issue is fill, and if I'm looking at the engineering's report, it says 1759 Safari Road, existing buried corrugated steel pipe. So is that what we're talking about, that existing culverts on
I imagine the weight of the dump trucks going over those culverts on a regular basis have damaged the culvert to the point where water can't flow in it anymore. And then the person's leveled out their driveway without putting in another culvert, which impacts water upstream.
And
Sorry, that was through the chair.
No,
Sorry.
thank you. That does help me understand. And the specific property that you're talking about with the illegal dumping, is that the same property, 1759?
Through the chair, I don't have the address at hand, but
I can ask staff.
I can pull it up in GPS if you want.
I'll ask staff when we get to the report. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. And that exhausts our speakers list. So thank you so much, Paul Osborne, for coming in to delegate and share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
You may now return to your seat. Thank you. Next up, we have Natalie Feistauer. Natalie, when you make your way down to the microphone, same for you, that you have 5 minutes in total. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell. When the bell rings, that means you have a minute remaining.
So I can start anytime?
Yes, please proceed.
Oh, okay. So, Chair Nan and members of the Public Works Committee, my name is Natalie Feistauer, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of myself and my husband, Gerald Tatro. We have provided a detailed written submission to this committee, so today I will simply summarize our main points. First of all, can the committee provide evidence used to determine that the Safari Road flooding is caused by blockages of water flow due to lack of or insufficiently maintained driveway culverts and beaver dams vegetation and sedimentation blockages? Was any historical data collected, such as natural baseline flows out of the wetland? Will this information be available to the public prior to the release of the full engineer's report? Secondly, has any consideration been given to other possible causes of flooding? We have lived around the corner from the Safari Road and Kirkwall Road intersection since 2005, so 18 years, and have only witnessed flooding of Safari Road to this extent in the last 3 years. So, as has been mentioned before, what's changed since 2020? The watercourse that drains the Safari Road wetland is ephemeral west of Kirkwall Road, meaning that it does not flow during the dry parts of the year. In 2021 and 2022, water flowed in the stream much later into the summer than usual, and this year water has not yet stopped flowing. This suggests that something more than just blockages is changing water levels in the Safari Road wetland, and maybe the whole system is changing. And as I've just found out, and we have just heard today, what about the impact of local local landscape changes as a result of substantial filling on property on Safari Road in the area in question? Since improperly maintained culverts on private property in the report are stated to be the significant cause of flooding, has the city utilized every means available to work with the landowners before the city petitioned for a costly and ecologically damaging municipal drain in the wetland? Point 4, we are relieved that full drainage in options 1 and 2 are not considered viable. However, what exactly is meant by the establishment of a natural channel as proposed in option 3A, partial drainage? Does it simply mean that blockages will be removed to restore natural water flow? Or does it mean that a naturalized channel will be engineered and maintained, including any level of dredging? Creating any kind of engineered channel in the wetland is very problematic because by definition, establishing anything that increases the movement of water out of a wetland changes its habitat and function. What are the implications for the wetland if the channel is designated as a municipal drain? Does this mean that adjacent landowners will have a legal right to petition for dredging of the channel to further reduce water levels in the event of storms or continual or high rainfall years? Point 6. How will the implementation of option 3A affect downstream properties after it crosses Kirkwall Road? Will it increase the risk of flooding? Will it negatively impact habitat downstream? Point 7, the GRCA has clearly described the critical ecological value of the Safari Road wetland and makes clear the emphatic need and legal requirements to protect its ecological and hydrological integrity. This wetland and adjacent high tract brings visitors from within and outside the city to enjoy a huge number of recreational activities, including, but not limited to, walking, running, hiking, biking, horseback riding, bird watching, wildlife viewing, nature interpretation, hunting, and simple relaxation. 8. The Safari Road wetland is also valuable green infrastructure to the city as long as it can function as a healthy wetland. Weather patterns are changing and we will experience drought in the future. During droughts, the water storage capacity of this large wetland will be critical to maintain habitat and groundwater levels for drinking water wells for local homes, for rural businesses, and for farms, as well as irrigation for farms. Installing any feature that increases the removal of water from the wetland runs the risk in dry years that water levels will drop to the point where the wetland can no longer function properly. Excuse me. Last point, we suggest alternative solutions to installing options to installing a municipal drain in the Safari Road wetland. These include implement part of option 3A by adding or repairing the culverts in the private driveways and then monitor water levels for one full water year. If flooding is not reduced to acceptable levels, then consider raising Safari Road as a suggestion in the original petition report. However, instead of fighting nature by trying to out-engineer it, we suggest permanently closing Safari Road between Kirkwall and Valens Roads. For the last 3 years, traffic has already been successfully rerouted around the closed Safari Road. Closing the road would reduce water contamination from road salt, litter, and car waste, reduce wildlife deaths from car collisions, including species at risk that don't avoid cars like turtles and amphibians, reduce noise pollution from passing cars, reduce localized air pollution from vehicle emissions, and eliminate high-speed traffic and make it much safer and more enjoyable for locals and visitors to observe wildlife and engage in other recreational activities as already mentioned. I also have 4 more points that are really quick. The closure of Safari Road would not impact emergency services as responders route to sites north-south axes roads from Rockton. Railings could be installed where the water's deep. School buses always modify their routes. And the closing road would reduce the cost of road maintenance. My apologies for going over time, and thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. On the speakers list, is there anyone indicating? First up, we have Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you for sending your comments in advance. I think it was really helpful to be able to go through them and understand, I think, as well, just the extent to which you're considering some of these questions as well. I think a lot of the questions that are maybe new from your delegation that haven't been asked by others have to do with some of the staging of the processes. What data, when do we get that information? If not today, when will that study come? And then as well, how will the public get that information? So in addition to kind of that question list we have ongoing, that's what I noted as being maybe unique or novel is when are we going to get what information and who's going to tell us? Are those some of the questions you'd like to carry forward as well?
Through the chair, yes, it would be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, followed by you. As next up is Councillor Pauls, please.
Thank you. And like I said before, I don't live near there, so I'm just trying to listen and understand what's going on. But I know in your delegation, you said something the best maybe is to close Safari Road. Can you how long is the road? How many kilometers is it?
Absolutely. So Safari, through the chair, yes. Safari Road is the east-west axis between Kirkwall Road and Valens, so it's a concession, so it's about a kilometer, thereabouts. And yeah.
1 kilometer? And how many houses live in that kilometer?
Through the chair, there are approximately, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, in the area of flooding where that would 5 that would be impacted by the road closure. There's 5 on the north side of Safari Road, and there's the public access to the high tract Crown land on the south side, but that is close to Safari and Kirkwall Road, and then on the south side, there's the large marsh area, and there's one more property. So specifically within the drainage area, there would be, as I think I said, 5 properties on the north side, 1 public access on the south, and 1 private driveway on the south side.
So my question is everyone in the same mind that it would be good to close the road, or do you have opposition?
Through the chair, I'm representing myself and my husband, so I can't speak for the community. I can infer from what the other delegates have said, their opinions. So, of course, the implications for closing the road would be the most, the people who live on Safari Road would, in that area, would be the most impacted. However, because there has been a lot of closures in Flamborough area, so, and we do drive through that area, so we reroute our own traffic whenever we go east from where we live on Kirkwall Road, and it's about a 7-minute about a 5-minute at most detour. If you're doing round trip, if you go from the middle of where the road would be flooded, and you go west or east, north or south, and then do a big circle, it's about 7 minutes. Not to say that, not to diminish the inconvenience, but with regard to bus routes, absolutely the gentleman had said about the impact for his daughter, but school buses routes do get, I grew up in a rural area, bus routes get rerouted all the time. The response times, again, it's north-south access from Kirkwall Hall, Fire Hall, so it doesn't impact because you meet in the middle, whoever's in the middle, which would be the 2 properties that have been actually under discussion today for the most part, the most. The other point is, in terms of commercial traffic, it is an established transportation route. However, it has been rerouted, as been mentioned before, and a lot of the traffic that goes to the African Lion Safari, which is arguably the largest economic draw in the area, does go through Highway 8, comes around through Regional Road 97, it goes up our road, which is Regional Road 52, and it also comes up through Cooper Road. In terms of Christmas tree farms, there are no Christmas tree farms substantially west of Kirkwall Road, so there is no impact coming from the east from Highway 6, where a lot of people would be coming up from the city. If they're coming up from another area, they would go up Valence Road or other areas. Again, I know that because I'm familiar with the area. There would be some inconvenience to people who aren't familiar with that, but GPS is pretty good now. Everyone's got a Google Maps. So
Thank you for the description.
Sorry.
I'm actually visualizing the whole area. It sounds beautiful there.
It is very beautiful.
I'll have to take a drive.
That would be great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that exhausts our speakers list. Thank you so much. Delegate Price-Tower for your delegation. You may return to your seat. Our final delegate that was pre-registered is Akeem Kloss. Delegate Kloss, if you can make your way down to the microphone. You have 5 minutes in total. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell, which means that you've got a minute left. And when you get to your microphone, we're ready when you are.
Chair Nan, we're just trying to pull up an image.
Thank you. Okay, we can see the image. Delegate Klaus, if you don't mind saying good afternoon and that's your mic, and then we're ready when you are.
Good afternoon, Chairman Nan. My name is Achim Klaas, and I guess out of all of these delegates, I'm the oldest one that has lived there since I was probably 12 years old. First in my parents' house, which was just down the road from where we live currently on Kirkwall Road. And my parents operated the Klaas Christmas Tree Farm for many years. And we still function to a limited extent with that as well. But for the last 50 years, I've been living in a house that literally I built in 1973. So I have witnessed everything in the area from the time when the Hyde Track was replanted with Christmas trees, or rather pine trees, conifer trees, and deciduous trees. And it became a reserve, a conservation area, and it always had the Fairchild Creek running through it. So to illustrate this, I'm going to use that particular map that I've slightly modified. So the Hyde Track is this section that's in here. And it runs along Kirkwall Road all the way down to the next concession road, almost, and is 350 acres of natural wilderness, if you will, within, when you consider it, the most densely populated part of Ontario, with millions of people surrounding this. It's a unique resource. But over the years, it has not been managed properly. And I'll jump to that in a moment. The particular report produced by the engineers involved not only is inaccurate in the sense that it doesn't show the landfill that is illegal that has been put into one of the provincially significant parts of this area, but it's also inaccurate in the red dotted line that indicates the drainage area into the Fairchild Creek. So one of the suggestions would be to have the engineers reassess what they've produced so far and make it more accurate. In particular, our residence that I'm referring to is right here in the green that I've colored in. You notice the red dotted line cuts across Kirkwall Road and curiously encompasses basically our 2-acre lot and then goes down to the corner where the Fairchild Creek runs through, only on the corner of the 50 acres that is part and parcel of our ownership in this area. The accuracy of this is important because if you're making people liable to correct the drainage problem within the drainage identified area, we clearly do not fall within those parameters. Kirkwall Road was rebuilt in 1980 approximately, and in order to do what they did, they actually jackhammered out the ditches on the side of the road through the solid rock and provided culverts all the way along. So for instance, where our lot is, there is a culvert that runs the entire frontage of our lot along the road that was placed into a jackhammered trench that ran from the Safari Road all the way down to the place where the Fairchild Creek crosses over. So this is inaccurate. It is inaccurate with the fill that has not been indicated, but I would like to submit, since that was the 4-minute mark, real briefly, this problem that is being faced here on the Safari Road is more than just caused by excessive fill, which has taken away area where the water normally would collect and then dissipate. The dissipation of the water is critical through the Hyde track, which when I was a kid was basically barren, but now is like a full eaves trough, full of debris, fallen trees, and everything else that does not allow the water to flow through properly. That's one factor. The fact that it's smaller because of the fill is another factor. And when you assess what has happened in the last 2 years when the road has flooded, it has flooded during periods where there was excessive rainfall in a very short period of time. In other words, the area could not dissipate the amount of water that came in quickly. And the reasons for that is the clogged nature of the unmanaged forest area, which is also, by the way, a fire hazard, and the fill that has been has taken away area of water where water would normally sit and be allowed to dissipate at its own rate. So you have a multitude of problems here, and I dare say one of the problems is also the road level could be raised.
Delegate Claus, I'm
Because
going
if
to
we're
have to
facing
interrupt
climate
you.
change, where
Delegate
you're
Claus.
going to get
Can you hear me? Hi, Delegate Claus. You're over your 5-minute mark by a minute and a half now. I'll let you say one final sentence, and then we do have a speakers list with some councillors. Perhaps the final points that you want to make could be raised in the responses to their questions as well. So
Thank you, Chair.
It's going to be fair and maintain, give you a little bit extra leeway. I thought you were wrapping up, but I just have to move on. I apologize. So first up on the speakers list, we have Councillor McMeekin, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. If either of you want to hear the closing remarks, you could ask that as your first question.
Thanks, Mr. Cross. Chair, through you. As I listen, and this is an area I know fairly well, to the concerns around the dumping, the height of the road, the culverts, and what have you, the obvious question that occurs to me is, did the people that wrote the report that's before us today actually sit down and meet with you and others in terms of putting that report together? The reason I ask, there are all kinds of, and I've read that report a couple times, one of the most comprehensive reports I've seen in a long time. You know, a lot about wildlife and the marsh and the wetlands. And I was really pleased to see that, but I'm learning a lot more just from the 5 delegates here. Was that part of the process, meeting with the engineer?
Through the chair, no.
That's too bad.
I mean, it would seem logical that you would talk to people that live in the area, especially people that have lived there for as long as we have.
Well, I was impressed with your starting with the 12-year-old boy growing up in a wilderness area and watching all the things happening. And I lament, frankly, and I know we're just supposed to ask questions here, but I guess the question is I just don't understand why with something as complex as this, our engineering people didn't actually take the time to meet with you and others who know that area inside out. We probably would have had a different report. The report we have now, which some people would like to see implemented, others say implemented but with some changes, and they've outlined what they are, puts us in an interesting situation where we either pause now at the risk of exacerbating the problem for a little longer, or go ahead with a recommendation that isn't quite complete. And I prefer to see a complete recommendation before we move. I suspect you would as well. Is that true?
Yes, through the chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you again for coming out and for sharing not just your experiences, but your time on the site, what you've seen change over time. And one of the things I really appreciate, I'll speak into the mic, that'll help. One of the things I really appreciate you bringing up is some of the concerns with the drainage boundary. I'm just gonna ask some clarifying questions to make sure I understand your concerns. Is it that the consultant's report relies on that red dotted line for the drainage boundary, but you know through your personal experience on that site that the natural drainage or whatever that red line may have originally been has since been changed through re-engineering of the road, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just the natural system, it's the natural system with our gray changes that we need to look at when we're thinking about the drainage area right now. Is
Yes.
that okay?
Yes, through the chair, yes, you're correct. There are no culverts that run east and west through that segment of Kirkwall Road. The water, if it comes off of our lot, which is on high ground, runs down beside the road all the way into the corner where the Fairchild Creek crosses over. There isn't a culvert there, there is actually a bridge. And the water flow does not cross over the road, therefore, we aren't part of the drainage system. And water doesn't flow upward either. We're downstream from the whole thing. So this dotted line is excessive. It's not accurate. It should be more localized around where the problem area exists on Safari Road. But what I was trying to submit was, I feel you have a multifaceted problem here. That it's not just the fill that has caused it. If you run into years where you get rainfalls the way we've witnessed them in the last 2 years, even if you put in culverts, even if you get rid of the soil, there is still a chance that that road could flood, simply because maybe the road is too low. And driving it over it for many years, there's been many times where the water has come very close to the top of the road. Only in the last 2 years has it gone over. And this is what we're trying to determine. Why did it go over in the last 2 years? You have a number of factors that have been presented that could cause this. But I believe if you return the whole system to its status quo, the way it used to be, that is the first step. And then take other measures, maybe proper forest management, clean out the waterway that runs through the forest, even management of the trees so you prevent forest fires. Can you imagine if that high track burned down? You know, this is right in the middle of the most densely populated area in Ontario. It is phenomenal. What it means to people, and yet it's been neglected for decades. And this is why we have so many forest fires in Canada, because how can you manage these millions of acres of forest? You can't, but you can certainly manage this one because it's right in the middle of this populated area.
Thank you for that. And yeah, that's something that I think was unique to your delegation in bringing up. In addition to the concerns regarding Phil, we've heard from many other delegates, in addition to all the questions we've had from other delegates, from the report itself that names potential causes. One of the things that you were bringing up was the management of the Crown land by the province, and the water flows through that land as it naturally plugs up, because that's what waterways do over time. Thank you. Really appreciate you bringing those forward, those concerns. In terms of solutions, I think that's my last question, was just seeking some clarity on whether or not you're supportive of the recommendation in the engineer's report, or if that's a difficult question for you, because it sounds like a lot of your concerns are regarding the rationalization within there. So at this point in time, are you asking for more information? Are you recommending a specific solution? Just on the way forward, what's your preferred solution?
Yeah, through the chair. First of all, I think the identification of what the drainage area consists of should be made more accurate. I think it should also show the landfill area that has invaded the amount of water space that used to be available. I mean, this is a major factor in all of this. And also, if the waterway is clogged, what kind of culverts are necessary to restore the balance the way it was before we've had this situation? In other words, the way it was before 2-3 years ago, to restore it to that level. That's what I'm suggesting, that maybe you should be looking at first. Raising the road is another aspect that can follow perhaps down the line with an overall plan, and also proper management of the area, which includes not just cleaning the waterway out, but also managing the forest as well. And by doing that, you prevent this kind of thing from clogging up again.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further?
Those were my questions. Thank you so much for that. And I agree, it would be great if, again, the province as the owner of the Crown land was doing some of those things. We can certainly entertain in those conversations about how we can be a partner in that, but just want to say who owns the Hyde track and who is the maintenance person for that, and who, you know, uses our tax dollars to put that towards Crown land as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Klaus, for coming in and sharing your thoughts on the subject. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive the registered delegations today, moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor McMeekin. Thank you both. It is before committee members for vote. And again, thank you to our delegates who are able to join us this afternoon. The vote is just loading and up. And that's a vote in the affirmative by Councillor Spadafora and Councillor Francis. And that carries 14-0. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to address committee on this matter? For a second time, are there any other members of the public who wish to come forward to speak on this matter?
Chair Nan, there is one member of the public coming forward.
Thank you. And as you come forward, if you've had a chance to write down your name and address and other pertinent information, there is a notepad at the podium if you haven't had a chance to do that already. Okay, good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yep. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep. Hello, folks. My name's Cody Carey. I'm representing my family who are residents on Safari Road.
Hi, Cody. You have 5 minutes in total, just like everybody else. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a bell, and then you'll have a minute left to finish up. Please proceed.
Perfect. So bear with me. I didn't have any speech planned or anything here. But I know you guys have heard a lot of information, so I hope maybe I can give a little more clarity on that. I think there were some questions that were had today that were maybe misunderstood, and maybe there were some misanswers put forward to them. Just a bit about myself, to give some context. I'm a professional engineer of Ontario. I'm a site manager at a mining site. I'm familiar with species at risk. I'm familiar with hydrogeology. All the birds, all that stuff. I've done the counts. I've signed off on these reports, so I'm relatively familiar with the content. I spent time at the preliminary, the first review of this, where there was an opportunity to talk to the engineer. There was questions. There was an opportunity to bring forward your concerns, provide your feedback as part of that preliminary consultation as well. One thing that was talked about at the very beginning of this was the intent of the report. So just remember, this first report was preliminary. There's more details. That's only just the beginning, right? The detailed report gives you more answers. It gives you more details. That's where the rest of the information comes from. So I don't think we should lose sight of that. And I think that's where a lot of the clarity needs to come from. The recommendation that was put forward to the engineer was to return the watercourse, the wetland, to its original state. And I asked, you know, we got all the engineering jargon, everything going on. I asked very clearly, so basically we're returning the wetland to its original state. Yeah, basically. So that's all we're trying to do here. One thing that we've all relatively agreed on here is that there's one individual that has caused a problem. The importation of soil, which I understand had a permit, was fine, but whether it was monitored and done according to the permits, another story. I have satellite imaging going back to 2002 that shows importation of soil with backfill going into protected wetland, P7 protected wetland area. So as far as species at risk are concerned and migratory birds, that's a big problem if you're damaging their habitat. So by damaging their habitat, that's illegal. That carries big fines, hundreds of thousands, millions, jail time. I think that's not to get off track here, but that's a separate problem that needs to be addressed with the individual that has caused all these issues. And to be clear, so everyone has some context, a case of beer, like I'm talking a 6-pack of beer and a backhoe, and this little culvert, that's this whole problem. It's that minor. We're all having this conversation for such a small culvert, which has basically been backfilled. And the satellite imaging shows in 2018 that activity happened in here in that area again, backfilling this culvert. So again, this is just to return the water to its original state and what existed, all the species at risk in that wetland. Again, bear with me here. I just jotted down some notes as we went. This is bringing the water back to its natural state. It's clear that this was man-made. This was not a natural event that happened. To clarify, in 2022 was one of the driest years on record. I still have the Flamborough Review pinned up on my wall that shows people's well going dry in 2022. So explain to me how the road gets flooded in a significantly historically dry season. So bear that in mind as well. And again, looking at why we're here today, this is for the Drainage Act. The main thing that's the Drainage Act talks to is coming up with a solution. And the problem that a lot of the residents have on Safari Road is the Drainage Act back charges the people that benefit from this. So one person causes the issues, but all the people that are impacted have to pay for it. And that's where a lot of people have problems. We know that this is not happening quickly. The solution's going to take time. There's detailed engineering reports, bureaucracy of going through this process, but the people don't want to pay for this out of pocket when it was one individual's cost. So overall, we want to move forward with the detail. I want to move forward with the detailed report and get a resolve on this, but the residents do not want to pay for this when they did not cause this. And that's basically all I have for my notes I wanted to address here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers with questions? Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you so much, Corey, for adding your name and coming on down. Just that last line there, supportive of the report, but want to see someone else. You know, if it's someone else caused the problem, why is the whole drainage area kind of responsible for it? I think you shared in your delegation, you know, that's a struggle with the Drainage Act. Do you have a recommendation on then how to move forward in that context? Or I guess there's a contradiction in those two sentences. How would you recommend we as the committee deal with that contradiction?
Well, I think it goes back in time and you can't change the past. I think that it's disappointing that it got to this point to begin with. Some of our friends mentioned that this has been going on for years, right? So this is not a new thing. People are frustrated. I think some people have been dealing with this up to 20 years, those that have been more impacted by this, like as far as water in the area, and it only getting worse. Like I said, backfilling this land, I got pictures in 2022 showing it, and it doesn't look like clean backfill. And it's, again, obviously in protected wetland area, the zoning outlines. So we kind of, I'm generalizing, I'm speaking for myself, but I think others feel this way too. We feel handcuffed by the process, and this feels like the only traction we've got so far to date, so I guess let's roll with it. But why are we paying for this? Like, the individual and or the city of Hamilton, as far as being the petitioner bringing this forward, I think should bear the cost of this. And I think, you know, as far as fairness, the individual needs to have some repercussions for causing all this grief on everyone, to be quite fair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Corey. I just want to really clarify, because I think you've had some familiarity with the process. There is that contradiction there in terms of who now has to pay for the solution, mentioning that there was a sense of unfairness there.
Yeah.
And so just wondering what your recommendation was, and it sounds like being proactive so we didn't get to this place is really the
But
what I'm hearing.
we can't change the past, right? So I would say have the city and or the individual pay for all of it or a split share, and hopefully this process can move along quicker than later. Some people mentioned are a lot more impacted by this. Their hay fields are underwater, right? Some people less so impacted, but it's not fair for this one person that had no impact on this to have to pay, who's the most heavily impacted by this, have to pay for it when he didn't cause it, right? And I'm not that individual. I'm just speaking on behalf of others right now.
Thank you so much, Corey. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. Cody, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I'm a little bit confused. Now it's all about the cost or who's paying for what, and you do support the report. The last speaker said that when he showed us the map, that it wasn't, he never mentioned about cost, but he mentioned he didn't support the report because of other blockage and the way it's situated, going high and going down, and he showed us a map. So I'm a little confused. You're just saying you support the report, but we want you to pay for it, and that's the only reason? Or is there more to this? Some people suggested to close the road. I'm a little bit, I'm not understanding what's happening.
Thank you.
Yeah, the road closure, I don't support that. I think what we're trying to do is return back to our original state where there was a road and where there was healthy flow of water. Again, the satellite imaging here, it shows a clear water channel. In 2018, it shows activity of backfill along the laneway leading to where the culvert of concern is. Sorry, and I don't know if I'm answering the question at the end.
I understand. At the beginning,
Through the chair?
Through the chair, sorry, because you're virtual, it's a lot harder than being in person. I'm just saying, I listened to all of them very careful because like I said before, this is not my area, and maybe I shouldn't even be asking questions because it's not my area, but I do want to understand. All of them mentioned, yes, it's the infill, and yes, but the last gentleman that came said it was other issues. It wasn't just because of the infill. It was because the way the drainage.
Respectfully, I disagree with that.
Okay, so there is two different views here that I thought, okay.
Yeah, and that's why I think there needs to be a little more clarification on that. There was the preliminary review and reports, and I know a lot of the people that are the most affected along Safari Road are not here today just by not seeing their faces. And it all ties back to this one culvert in question mainly. That, you build a dam up and the water's going to hold back.
Okay. Is this area under the Hamilton Conservation Authority?
Yes, as far as I know.
So they look at
no, is this the GRCA in that part? Yeah, so it's right on that border.
Okay, and they've been notified. I guess I'll ask question to the staff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I see nobody else is on the speakers list. Thank you. I'm going to say Delegate Cody because I didn't catch your full name. Thank you so much for joining us. You may return to your seat.
Thanks, folks.
Any other members of the public that are wishing to come forward at this time to speak on this matter? Are there any other members of the public for the third and final time who wish to come forward to speak to this matter?
Chair Nan, I see no members of the public coming forward.
Thank you, Elsie McIntosh. May I then please have a mover and seconder first to receive the last delegation that we just had. Thank you, Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor McMeekin. So we'll need to vote on that and then we'll close the meeting. And the vote is up. And then finally, oh, I should wait until that is tallied. That carries. And then may I please get a mover and seconder to close the public portion of the meeting? Moved by Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Thank you. And that will require an electronic vote. And the public meeting is now closed. On the report, committee members, I'll need a mover and seconder to put it on the table. Thank you, Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Danko. And we do have Lauren Franklin, engineer at engineering firm of Robson's Consultants, and Hector Cuentro, who is our project manager for stormwater operations and maintenance, available to answer any of your questions. The speakers list is open. And are there any questions for Councillor Danko?
Thank you, Chair. I'm familiar with a little bit of the history of this site, and I think it's pretty clear that we need to move forward with a full engineering investigation. I really do appreciate the input from the staff, but technically speaking, it's a fairly straightforward evaluation. I want to focus in, though, on almost all the delegates have singled out this single property owner that is an issue. And my understanding from some of the history on this project is that there is a culvert on this property that was filled in. There was additional fill that was brought in, and that has basically caused this entire problem. And because of the nature of this individual, staff have not been able to access the property or that culvert to assess either the level of damage or anything in terms of remediation. Am I understanding the history here?
Who from staff will be answering the question?
Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So my understanding with regards to the fill on the property was that the property owner did apply for a permit in consultation with the department here with the city, as well as dealing with the Conservation Authority. My understanding is that permit was approved, and there was the allowance of different soils to be brought to that property.
Has the property owner threatened our staff? Has they had interactions with our staff in terms of access to their property or any other interactions with this property owner that would cause us concern? And perhaps we would have to go in camera to really talk about that in detail, but
so through the chair, Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. Just checking with our staff back here, we have no indication that our staff have been threatened.
Okay. So speaking to the matter at hand, as I said, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we need to go forward with a full evaluation. I would tack on a request for a review with legal staff for an investigation of any illegal dumping, illegal activity that may have occurred, and how we would move forward with enforcement, whether that's through city or a referral to provincial authorities, noting that the owner of 1759 Safari Road, Canada's largest chop shop, has spent 45 days in jail with a fine of $10,000 for violating the Environmental Protection Act. And if there is an option for daily fines, as the city has faced, I think we need to investigate all options, or at least ensure that the ministry is aware of any activities that may require investigation and their enforcement, as they have enforced against the city of Hamilton. So I'd add that on as an amendment at the appropriate time. Thank you.
If you could please type up the language, and then at the appropriate time, we'll turn to you for your amendment. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor Alex Wilson, followed by Councillor Crutch.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just a heads up, I think this will take 2 times on the speakers list. So just acknowledging that at the beginning and not going to try and rush my way through it. Quite a number of questions, both for myself and the delegates have raised today. And so happy to go back on a second time. I think just starting off, though, through you, Chair, I'm wondering if both our staff and consultants we have in the room would be able to talk about the preliminary report we do have in front of us, as well as what are some of the next steps or studies done if we go forward with recommending option 3. So what does that look like? We get another report back. There have been concerns about impacts to the watershed, impacts downstream, getting some of those kind of answers as to maybe what the engineering's been done. By approving the report today, are bulldozers doing dredging next week? What does that timeline look like for residents who are asking for more information? And are we kind of putting something in motion, or is there another vote later?
So through the chair, I'd like to address that. So this is the preliminary, as was mentioned. What we're looking for is approval to proceed with the full engineering report. And in a moment, I'll ask Mr. Franklin, Lauren Franklin, who's the city's appointed engineer, to discuss, what that looks like. The time frame is between 12 to 18 months to complete that full report to come back with recommendations. And so the purpose, the next step is to complete the report. Then we come back with what the final recommendations are along with all that study. And through that process, there's opportunities for the public to appeal, for council to make decisions on whether we proceed with that or not. And so, to the point, I think we've got a pretty thorough preliminary report, but the next step really is to do that full investigative report. And I'll invite Mr. Franklin to comment on what that might look like, please.
Thank you. So yes, the purpose of a preliminary report is primarily just to investigate options and determine feasibility. It does not include any of the detailed study that a bunch of the delegates are looking for. The next step in the process, if appointed to do so, is to commence a full report. That includes ongoing public consultation. It also includes detailed studies. The hydraulic studies that one of the delegate mentioned is part of the process. The review of the drainage area boundary, I would note at this point that it's quite atypical to actually have a drainage area boundary. It was provided, it was generated from computer-generated drainage area boundary and put in there for preliminary information purposes only. During a full report, that would be studied, finalized, field truth, all of those things. And I would note in particular for Mr. Close, who said that his property is likely not in the drainage area boundary. By looking at it, he's probably correct that it isn't, and the final study would likely limit the drainage area boundary to the center line of Kirkwall Road, which is quite typical for most projects. So that is one thing. After the detailed studies are done, there's further. The report is drafted. That is sent to environmental agencies such as the Grand River Conservation Authority, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks for species at risk. All those things, that's their point of contact to require more study if necessary for environmental impacts, to make their comments or concerns known. The report can be modified at that point before it is finalized. After those are received and permits would be available for any work, the report is then brought back to the public, distributed to the public, brought back to council, and they can review at that point as well. So there's lots of consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll put you down for a second time. Next up, we have Councillor Crutch.
I'll be brief so you can return soon. My question is really only about the process for permitting. And so I get that a process for permitting doesn't necessarily involve an inspection in advance, that you submit an application for that permit, people review the application, and they may or may not decide to make a site visit if it's warranted. What I want to understand, though, is how we follow up these permit applications for dumping, because dumping is a really wide idea, right? You know, obviously the permit outlines what you can and can't dump. You obviously can't dump hazardous materials, other kinds of things. It's common sense. But I'm wondering what our relationship as a city is to that ongoing process, right? So how long does the permit last for? Do we ever actually physically go out there and have a gander? I'm looking just basically in a rudimentary way at Google Maps and looking at the amount of fill, and it's a lot. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that. I just don't know the processes in rural areas for that.
Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So I'll provide maybe just a little bit of my understanding of the process because this process doesn't reside within transportation. So when a permit is provided, I believe it's through the growth development group here, which falls under planning. There'll be a review consultation, and again, the Conservation Authority in this particular case would have been involved on allowing any excess soil to be taken to this specific property. With regards to the permit, there would be restrictions, there would be timelines, I believe, added to that permit. And again, without understanding the process on the timing for them to go to the property or not, I can't speak to that. With regards from a road authority perspective, if we have been notified of excessive trucking or dirt debris on a roadway and we're contacted, this is something that we will go out and inspect. And we do work very closely with our MLE group on looking into the matter and what the restrictions or the conditions may be within that permit, and then working with respective parties as required. So without having that group online that maybe can talk more formally, I'm just talking about it from the perspective of transportation's role when we're informed in what we do out there.
Thanks. I'm generally supportive of what Councillor Danko was putting forward, and that's what my line of questioning was going to be about. I'll just leave with a final comment on this. I think where I sit as a downtown councillor, if somebody moves a blade of grass by 6 inches, 17 people see it, right? Because we live in a very dense area, not to be too hilarious about this. But one of the things that I've heard from residents is A, they're able to observe the patterns of these things going on, but that B, there remains still an ability to access these lands. You can't really see entirely what's going on. These are private lands that are held by other people. You can get drones and carry on in that manner, but generally speaking, you don't have a lot of access to be able to see what's going on, and then you don't have access to be proactive as a result. So whatever we do here, I think this is an opportunity for us to think through how we understand these permitting processes in rural areas, what our obligation is to check in on how the progress is going, and if we scope out or have them expire with an investigation, whatever it might be, right? So we have a better sense of what's being done there. Does the volume meet the restrictions? Those kinds of things, because there's no eyes on the subject, right? You have the permit to do it, and then the landowner may just think, hey, this falls within the permit with no guidance, right? So I think it's an opportunity for us to think about how we apply permits in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor McMeekin, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate Councillor Crutch's comments and questions about process. I think we're making some progress on process, but probably not enough. I know we now need permits. We limit the kind of fill that can come into being restricted to within the Hamilton area. Once you've got special waiver, it has to be clean. The option of inspection is there. That having been said, we've still a lot further to go. And I think a focus as per Councillor Danko on retracing some history and such is useful. That having been said, my concern is we've got obviously a presenting problem, and I had suggested to one of the speakers that This is a preliminary study. We need to look at some other options, more conversations, making sure we talk to everybody on Safari Road. Councillor Jackson was making that point about, what are the potential consequences, and really ensure that I think this is going to have to be chunked out in phases. The first phase is to try to solve to whatever we can and as best we can the presenting problem, flooding, and that's culverts and what have you, then trying to restore the natural area. Beyond that, I think we've got some questions around the possibility of raising the road. We talk a lot about climate change and how we need to be resilient, have a resilient strategy around that. Part of that is going to be revisiting existing infrastructure and being challenged to enhance it. And this may be a classic example. There may be others, particularly in rural areas, as Cameron Kretsch, I think, was hinting at. Thank you for that. So it needs to be fulsome. I like the idea of the reference to the legal staff. Again, I would just repeat, we got to do this in a phased way. But it's absolutely incumbent that we do it right. This will be a good model, a good dartboard in a sense to see just how we might down the road be handling some of these kinds of situations. And I'm confident that we're in a position to do a much better job, particularly if we can layer our approach to finding a solution here. So I really do appreciate the folk that have come out. There's a lot of new information's been shared, and there's some obviously some more work that needs to be done. And I think it is incumbent on this council to do it. Full stop. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin. Next up, we have Councillor Cassar, then Councillor Pattison, and then for a second time, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Just one question and potentially a follow-up depending on the answer, and it might be one of Councillor Alex Wilson's questions, so I'll maybe help them along. Most of our delegates were very clear on their opinion of the root cause of this is illegal fill, or fill, I'll just put it that way, onto a property within the provincially significant wetland area. Question to staff and the consultant, do you believe that fill into this area being discussed is a cause, the cause, partial cause of the issue that we're having here? I would like to just get that on the public record so that everyone can understand as an answer to the delegates' questions. Thank you.
Through the chair, Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. The purpose of the preliminary study and this process in the Drainage Act is it's really about forward-facing. So the process to date has not looked back at what was the historical land fill, what is the issue today, and what is the potential solutions for moving it forward. And so that's been the lens of this preliminary report. Does fill potentially impact wetlands? That makes sense. I would defer to Mr. Franklin on his expert opinion if he has one from his preliminary report.
So the answer is a somewhat limited because it was a preliminary report and there was limited study done. And it is forward-facing, as staff have said. It looks for a solution. What we did find from our study and from aerial drone footage is what appears to be fill, what appears to be a raised driveway, causing a dam, blocking water without a culvert through it, or actually I believe that there was a damaged culvert completely blocked off and buried in that was in that area. Beyond that, there hasn't been a detailed enough study of the other areas to determine if there is fill placed in those areas. That will be completed with a full report, but in short answer, yes, we believe that fill and a damaged culvert is at least partially responsible for some of the problems and would alleviate the part of the solution would be to fix that and alleviate the problems.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Nan. That answered my question and hopefully somewhat edifying for our delegates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kassar. Next up, we have Councillor Taddison.
Hi, I'm just going to ask a question of our staff for my own rural understanding of hydrology. And I'd like staff's opinion on this. One of the delegates did say that the season, the year of 2022 was exceptionally dry. So my question is, if we have an exceptionally dry time and then receive a heavy rainfall, does not the hardness of the soil make that rainfall more likely to flood because it doesn't act as a sponge? Just for clarification.
Through the chair, Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. That really depends on the conditions. So if it is extremely dry soil, we've seen that where it doesn't absorb into the ground faster, but it depends on the soil content, it depends on the vegetation. In that particular area, we'd have to do some study to analyze whether or not that would be an issue.
And again, thanks for clarifying that, because you've noted my background. I'm from the clay of Bimbrook, so I get it now. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taddison. And over to you, Councillor Alex Wilson, for your second time.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just a couple of questions on this report in front of us, then I'll move to the next report that we're kind of getting next. But just on this one in front of us today, historic flooding was talked about, and I think that was something that residents were curious about. From the perspective of the preliminary report, what was meant by the authorship team by historic issues with flooding? Could they provide some more details and answer the questions that were asked by delegates earlier?
So through the chair, Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. Listening to and talking with Director Rawl, the roadway flooding is fairly recent, where it's been closed for long periods of time. What we've heard from the residents is that over the years, we've had some overtopping, maybe for a day or two with some signage. And then what we heard from some of our public sessions is that I used to have dry lands, fields, and over the years, they have now backed up and they've become wetlands, or not wetlands, but open water, where there's standing water there for longer periods of time. So where Hamilton Water and the Road Authority started this process in August 2022 was because of the safety issues with the road being closed for a good portion of the year. And so when we talk about the flooding, it's really that flooding, but and I could ask Mr. Franklin to clarify, but the historical flooding, I think, is that continuing to grow flood of people seeing their lands hold more water, not necessarily road closures. Mr. Franklin?
So as previously stated, the Drainage Act process is forward-facing. We receive, through public consultation, which was done with all the affected parties in that drainage area boundary as defined. One was completed on October of 2022 and another one on May 5th of 2023. We received the information of historic flooding, let's call it. Through that, it's anecdotal. It's not something we generally look at. What we generally look at is the solution going forward that's going to satisfy the concerns of all parties. What was reported to us with regard to historic flooding was predominantly within the last 3 years, the road closures, flooding of areas of PSW that weren't normally open water, but were treed, boggy fen areas rather than open water parts where the trees are now dying because they're in permanently flooded areas. Not that they aren't PSW, but that they are, the changes in the conditions are there. That's what was reported to us, as well as ongoing and ever increasing incremental changes in what they see on their land. That's what was reported to us.
Thank you through the chair, appreciated. Moving forward then, focusing on those solutions where we're going next, just wondering the further full kind of engineering report that we're talking about. We've heard conversations about downstream impacts. I know there's conversation about a full hydrological analysis being part of that, just looking for explicit confirmation that downstream impacts would be confirmed to that. I think it's a pretty easy, but just looking for that confirmation.
So under the Drainage Act, it's the requirement of the drainage engineer to take any water that comes from a municipal drain to a sufficient outlet. So the study area currently ends at Kirkwall Road. However, if throughout this process or through the hydrology and hydraulic review, it needs to go further to ensure that there's no impact, the engineer will always take it to an area where the flows that are generated do not cause impact. And in general, like it has been said, this is meant to be, the option that's proposed here is meant to be a restoration of the natural flows. So it's only a return to what was previous without the blockages rather than any new or full drainage. It's not meant to drain the entire wetland. It's not meant to get rid of the storage area. All those things will remain in place. So there's limited flow, and we anticipate that it can be taken to that point and successfully without any impacts, but that will be reviewed for sure.
Thank you. And through the chair, again, a question that was specifically asked was, what is option 3? Like, using plain language, are we putting in a bulldozer and dredging it? Like, what is the actual option to make that channel, to put in that drain? Understanding there will be a further report, there will be recommendations, but within this, we have certain technologies at hand. We know roughly what the set of tools we'll be using are. For residents concerned about those impacts to PSWs, what's actually going to be happening, could you speak to the work of what Solution 3 entails? There was a specific question as, are you creating a man-made channel, for example?
Option 3A is presented in the report, which was the recommended option, is the replacement of the 3 driveway culverts. Review of the fill impacted area, potentially channelization within that fill impacted area to cut a restored channel through the fill impacted area and return the base flow. It removes blockages or sediment that may have occurred as a result of the current blockages. So where there's blockages in place and where there's flooding happen, there will be sediment that has accumulated since then. It's primarily the solution is primarily the definition of a corridor that allows for maintenance for the future. It allows for access to private lands, which the city doesn't otherwise have except through the Drainage Act. So you have the access to go in there and to restore and to protect the work that you've done. It is not specifically dredging within the PSW other than the replacement of culverts or through the fill area. It's anticipated that by fixing the culverts and removing the fill and restoring the natural base flow and the removal, so it does involve the removal of vegetation to ensure that there's an open water corridor, which did exist there previously from aerial photography. So to ensure that that natural open water corridor continues to exist and then allow the natural flow of water to restore itself and to allow the channel to restore itself, not specifically dredging within the wetland.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for that answer. I think my very last question just on this report in front of us, I do have 2 questions for roads after that are unrelated to this specific report, but to the road raising. But for the drainage area, under the Drainage Act, under the tools that we're using that allow us this access to the private property where the problem is, are we allowed to have a weighted fee? So for example, within that red line, understanding we'll get that dotted red line to where it should be through further studies, does everyone within the dotted red line have to pay the same fee? Or can that be weighted under the Drainage Act due to impact? Is a question we heard from some residents basically saying, if this person caused the problem, why am I paying for it? To kind of put it in really simple words, what tools do we have under that provincial legislation?
Through the chair, Shane Macaulay, Director of Wastewater Operations. So the way the Drainage Act is, it is up to the city appointed engineer, so in this case, Mr. Franklin, to do that assessment based on overall benefit from the work that's being taken place. My understanding is because the municipality is the one that's brought forward the petition under the Road Authority delegation, we will likely be assessed a higher portion of that. So it's not take it all, divide it by the number of people and everyone pays the equal amount. It is assessed based on the benefit to those impacted property owners. And the city in this case here has a significant impact and benefit from it. So we would likely bear the brunt of that cost. But that would all be done as part of the final report and that assessment.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. As said, just two quick questions for roads. One, my understanding is completely separate from the Drainage Act. That's our ability to fix the problem. But then there's other things that we can do. This is infrastructure that the city owns, for example, raising the road. Through you, Chair, potentially to our Director of Roads, just wondering, what does that process look like to investigate raising the road? What work's ongoing there? Is that something that we're moving forward with, that we're studying? There's been some conversations there.
Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So yes, Councillor, we are looking at working very closely with our engineering services division with regards to advancing environmental assessment, which we're targeting to begin next year. That will take anywhere from a year to 18 months, and then pending the results of that environmental assessment, which will look at potentially raising the road or another alignment as part of that analysis, and that'll be brought back for further consultation. We've got design and potentially construction again is something that we're planning for, and again working very closely with our engineering division on that.
Thank you, really appreciate that. And final question through the chair, very, very high level question. We have a biodiversity action plan forthcoming. We are doing asset management studies on all of our municipal assets, including green infrastructure or a natural heritage system. So we're gonna get some numbers about how much wetlands are of value to the city. We're also gonna get some numbers about road maintenance costs and be able to better measure road assets across their lifetime. We're also better understanding what our biodiversity needs are across the city. And so for the residents who are asking, why can't we just close this road? My understanding is we're not in a place right now where we necessarily think like that as a city, where we say, here are the biodiversity costs of, building this road up to standard once we have our new biodiversity plan that talks about turtle tunnels and all these wonderful things. Here are those new costs built in with who's using this road today, how essential of a road use is it, flooding costs, all of those numbers coming together into one integrated ability to assess this situation and understand what is best both for the city as a whole in terms of responsible asset management, the local transportation needs, et cetera. I guess I'm wondering, where are we going as a city? And I understand this is a multi-departmental question, but how are we considering the possibility of closing roads because of biodiversity concerns, because of flooding concerns in the future? And if it doesn't make sense here, when will we know if it makes sense, and how will we know it makes sense?
Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So speaking from a transportation lens only, because in fairness, there's other colleagues on the call. We've got Brian Hollingworth from Planning if we need to have him provide a response in addition. He's online. But from a transportation perspective, and I'll use this case as the example, as part of the environmental assessment, which is the work I just made mention that we're looking to work very closely with engineering and water and wastewater starting next year. That would be part of something we could be looking at with regards to whether the alignment would change or the road would be closed or the road would be elevated. So that is something that typically is looked at through an environmental assessment process when you're looking at a specific road section, any works that may be happening there. From a much broader perspective, again, and I can defer to Brian, but my understanding is through official plans that that the city undertakes. The road network is one piece that's analyzed, and there's many factors that go into, again, whether a road would be closed up or realigned. It has to do with volume. It has to do with the growth for that area. There's many different factors that are contemplated, obviously, with regards to whether a road would be stopped up and closed, on how it would be realigned, how traffic would detour, how it would affect commercial business. There's a lot of different factors with regards to it. But with regard to the specific case here today, as part of the environmental assessment, I would think that that's something that would be looked at potentially as an option, and there'd be a recommendation to move ahead with it or not based on the need of the road.
Thank you. Those were my questions. Really appreciative through you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Councillor. So that exhausts our speakers list. We have the report in front of us. And we did we get a mover and seconder?
Yes, Chair Nan, we did. We had Councillor A. Wilson as mover and Councillor Danko as seconder.
Thank you. And so now we are at amending motion to the recommendations by Councillor Danko. Councillor, if you want to introduce your amending motion and your seconder, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did email it. I'm not sure if we can, there we go. Thank you. So the amending motion is that we add number C, that staff investigate the impacts of alleged illegal dumping and any block culverts on private property and report back on the impacts of these activities, including enforcement options and coordination with provincial authorities as required. I would need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Cassar. Thank you. So just very briefly to speak to this, again, really appreciate the discussion and the residents coming in to share their perspective. My historic understanding of this issue is largely because of one single property owner. There is a block culvert identified on the engineering drawings on the plan. And we've heard from the consultant that a block culvert and fill on private property is at least partially to blame. We are potentially dealing with a property owner here that has already been convicted of several Environmental Protection Act violations, including storing petroleum and demolition debris without approval, and similar charges related to the destruction of refrigeration equipment, has spent time in jail and has been fined. So even if he had the permits for fill, I have no confidence that he is actually doing what perhaps was in the permits. And I think we have an obligation to at least investigate that and look at the pre-existing conditions here, because what we're talking about is forward-looking, and I think there are solutions on public property. If the solution is simply to put it back the way it was before on the private property component, and if there are enforcement portions that go along with that, I think we have an obligation to investigate that at the very least, and have the full range of options before us. So hopefully staff can do that. That is my intention for the direction that's on the table, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McMeekin on the amending motion.
Yes, thanks very much. I intend to support the motion. I think that makes all the sense in the world as far as it goes. I do though want some assurance that the many and wide matrix of ideas that were expressed here, everything from the red line boundary to consulting with the people directly on Safari Road, if road closure were one of the options, to building up the road, to referring to our own climate change office and any other agencies like the Conservation Authority, that is all anticipated to be part of the subsequent process, this being just the preliminary report. If I get that assurance, I don't have to make another amendment. I would just register it as such.
I can jump in.
Thank you.
Hi, Jackie Kennedy, Director of Engineering Services and Acting General Manager. So with the drainage study that's going on through the engineer that we have here today, they will be looking at the immediate response to the flooding and the environmental assessment that will be going on through engineering services. We'll look at some of those longer term suggestions and requirements. So between the two, there'll need to be coordination, so we make sure we're moving in the same direction. But those are going to be two prongs on the same tool moving forward to address the concerns that we've heard today.
So the concerns shared by the speakers, including Mr. Cross, draw attention to him in particular because he had some, they were all substantive, but he was very focused in his substantive remarks. Good enough. Thanks through you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the assurance.
Okay, so that is the amending motion as put forward by Councillor Danko. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other speaker on the amending motion? The one that's before us. Seeing none, then it's before committee for electronic vote, please.
Chair Nan, Councillor Alex Wilson, no?
Not, I believe it's not on Councillor Danko's amendment, I think. Yeah. And that carries 13-0. And now over to you, Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you. I would like to move a motion, but I think I'm just seeking confirmation about if I'm asking to do something that's already happening. So if I could just ask a clarifying question to make sure I'm not asking us to do work that's already going to happen anyway. Okay. By moving forward with the full engineering report, are we getting a report back on all of the options and all of the solutions considered in the original preliminary report, or is it locking in preferred solution 3 and getting an expanded report just focused on the preferred solution? The language of, approving the report and authorizing to prepare a full engineering report just isn't clear on me on what we're instructing that report to come back with.
Okay, over to staff who would be able to answer.
Through the chair, Shane McCauley, Director of Water Wastewater Operations. I'm going to defer that question to our appointed engineer, Mr. Franklin.
Okay.
Thank you. We can consider any options that we are directed to do so in the appointment of an engineer under the full report. However, it is typically the consideration, and I believe it should be the consideration, that only the recommendation for option 3A be studied.
Councillor?
Thank you. Hearing that and having that made explicit, I would like to add an amending motion that has, in addition to considering option 3A, which I think is a great option to consider and get that full report on, an option of road closure be considered as well in the full report, understanding that the environmental assessment will look at that from its own lens, but I do think it is important to consider the impact of a road closure from the perspective of the full engineering report, given that we did have delegates asking for that today. I'm hearing that that would not have happened had we not made it explicit, and so I would like to make it explicit.
Okay, so then the amendment would be to include a report back of recommendation 3A and add on a road closure. If there's clearer language, maybe Elsie McIntosh, you can help us out there. Thank you. Okay, so that's clear. Councillor Wilson, do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to suggest one. I think potentially Councillor McMeekin or Councillor Maureen Wilson, but I do see that many members of the bench have turned on their mics through you, Chair, and I think the clerk would like to let you know who's turned on their mic.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Nan, we have Director Kennedy And Director Rael.
Acting General Manager, you
I
first.
just turned my mic on to defer it over to Director Ryle, since I saw her looking to
Perfect, Director.
chime in on this point for some clarity, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So just to clarify the additional point here. So that would not be covered under the Drainage Act and the report that's going to be coming back. The potential closure of the road or a realignment or an elevation is something we would be dealing with through the environmental assessment, which is something that we're going to be beginning with engineering in 2024. So they're separate, just to provide that additional bit of clarity. But we will be looking at that as a potential option through the environmental assessment process.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I'm happy to follow up offline. We have time before council. I don't know that I understand the difference between that distinction, and I could see a value in having the information be duplicated in both reports, but we have time before Wednesday to move any amendments if needed, and I'll follow up offline. With that, I'll withdraw. Don't need the seconder, and may come back on Wednesday. Folks will get an email if so.
Appreciate that. Okay, so that's withdrawn. We're back to now the main recommendations as amended with Councillor Danko's add-on. Councillor McMeekin, I see your name on the speakers list. Given the withdrawal of the further amendment on the main recommendations as amended.
I wasn't going to speak a second time, but when Councillor Wilson made his amendment, which I thought was a good one, I just wanted to make sure that it rolled into it all the other suggestions that had come up. And the previous answer was to provide that assurance. So I just want to make sure that that's our clear understanding, because this, when all is said and done, this is all about trust, you know, the process that we can trust. And I think that's what the good people who have come out today want to make sure, that whatever we decide today, that their remarks, their very fulsome remarks and very fulsome considerations are at least going to be considered as part of that report, and I had that assurance. So, which made Councillor Wilson's motion not necessary, given that we...
Sorry, you cut off there in the last bit there, but it's suffice that.
Unnecessary, given that we have a clear understanding that all those substantive suggestions will be examined.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So that exhausts our speakers list. We're back on item 10.1, recommendations as amended. No further speakers. It's been duly moved and seconded for committee for a vote. Clerk, that's a vote in the affirmative for me. eScribe doesn't seem to be giving me the chance to vote right now. That carries. Thank you. Okay, on to discussion items. I do know that there are some time pressures as well, so we have a few discussion items as well as some motions and notices of motions to get through. Committee members, if we're able to get there by 4:30, I can stay in your chair. And at 4:30, I will have to pass on the chair to Vice Chair Pauls. So first up is 11.1, standardization of original equipment manufacturers for parks, assets, playgrounds, spray pads, ball diamonds, and benches. PW Report 23069. Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham, will introduce the report.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. So this report outlines the challenges that park staff have had in securing vendors and parts for several categories of park amenities, namely park equipment, play equipment, spray pads, benches, and ball diamond infield material and services. The challenges staff have had is that there's several manufacturers of play equipment and spray pads, and when those items need repair, only parts that are manufactured by that vendor can be used on the equipment. To date, staff have used the procurements available to them, namely Policy 11, Sole Source, to secure the parts needed to maintain the park assets. Standardization of these items would allow staff to be able to purchase those needed pieces to be able to maintain and repair the equipment that the city owns in a timely way. The second piece, ball diamond infield grading and restoration and topping up of infill clay material has been a challenge over the past few years. Several rounds of open procurements have failed, with the vendors not being able to fulfill the requirements of the contract. The grading and maintenance of the infield surfaces of ball diamonds ensures a safe play surface to minimize injuries and ensure a good playing surface for the players. The past 2 years have had successful commercial relationship with the listed vendor with high quality work and supply materials. The standardization would allow the city to continue that good relationship without the need for additional Policy 11 approvals, which are currently maxed out. Lastly, the city bench program maintains thousands of benches in city park locations. The current style allows staff to replace individual boards as they are worn or damaged. The use of recommended vendor to supply the park bench boards would allow these benches to continue to be a cost and time-effective way to manage the city bench program. The standardization would follow the procurement policy 14 requirements, and I have staff and myself available to answer questions as needed.
Thank you, Director. Before we can get into any questions, may I please have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor? Councillor Jackson, Huang, are you both comfortable doing that? Thank you. And then first up on the speakers list, we have Councillor Jackson, followed by Councillor Huang.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nan. Happy to move it. Just a quick question through you to Director Graham. I listened very carefully, Director Graham. All I need to know, please, is as you're questing to have standardization across the board, with all the civic engagement I do with various park groups, the playgrounds they wish to pick out, the neighborhood meetings, the type of splash pad, walkway benches, etc. In your quest to go in the standardization route, that doesn't preclude or alter the fact that neighborhoods and communities may have differences of opinion with the type of playground, the components of the playground, that particular spring toy, that won't alter choice down the road, or will it? Through you, Chair Nan, that's my only question, please.
Through the chair, no, the intent isn't to limit the choice or the ability of the neighborhoods to provide input into what they would like to see in their play equipment. And in fact, it doesn't limit the manufacturers that could be considered in those neighborhood park redevelopment programs. What this is when you have an existing piece of play equipment or a spray pad, there's particular parts that are required to maintain and operate those pieces. And those parts are proprietary to the manufacturer. And so when staff have to buy the pieces to keep those play structures or spray pads going, we have to sole source that. And so that's why we're asking for the standardization, is to be able to purchase those pieces that we can only go to one manufacturer for.
The directors raised my comfort level to answer my question, Chair Nan. Still happy to move it and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Huang.
Thank you. Along the same lines as Councillor Jackson, actually, when we're talking about sole sourcing, what about when we start to have playground designs that are AODA compliant, or how about specialized type equipments for children in wheelchairs, for example, or children with autistic, like touch feel type play? Will that also be included in the standardization of all of these new play structures?
Through the chair, so if those pieces and parts are manufactured by one of the manufacturers that's listed, then we will be able to procure those pieces for those manufacturers. Recognizing that the industry changes and there may be new manufacturers come and we may purchase pieces of equipment from those new manufacturers, we can amend the standardization over time through another report back to committee to include those manufacturers, and we would use the tools available to us to be able to maintain those in the meantime. So I'm not concerned about limiting the ability to expand the city's play amenities to new and innovative ways to have play.
Thank you. Second question through you, Chair, is about baseball diamonds. I do note that in this report, it does speak about baseball diamonds in the past has required significant specialty maintenance and restoration. I'm thinking about the baseball diamonds at Montgomery Park, where there is specific flooding on several of those baseball diamonds. So how do we specialize, given that each of these baseball diamonds have their own, how do we make it all one type when a lot of these baseball diamonds have a significant amount of challenges, wear and tear on a very specialized and custom sort of way? I hope I kind of give you the gist of my question.
Through the chair, so drainage and grading concerns on any particular ball diamond wouldn't necessarily be solved or not solved by this standardization. This is for that infield granular material that is standard across most baseball diamonds. There's specialty clay mounds that's you know, on some ball diamonds, and so this product is widespread used across Hamilton. If there's particular ball diamonds that are having grading and drainage issues, those would be solved through a grading exercise, not through the work of this specialized vendor.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And that exhausts our speakers list. It's been moved and seconded and before committee to vote. And that carries. Thank you, committee members. On to 11.2, which is updated sewer and drain bylaw PW 23070 citywide. Director of Water and Wastewater Operations, Shane McCauley, to introduce the report, please.
Good afternoon, through the chair. This report introduces amendment to the sewer and drains bylaw. It's 17 years old, and it hasn't had a fulsome review since then. Amendments have really been about user fee updates on an annual basis. This bylaw, really the big things for it is updates and changing joint use agreements with legal easements that transfer, that stay there with the ownership of the property, as well as allowing staff to enforce the correction of cross connections, sewer lateral cross connections, which was missing from the previous bylaw. So really some administrative updates, but also gives Hamilton Water staff the authority to deal with those cross connection issues.
Thank you for that overview. Committee members, any questions? Seeing nobody on the speakers list, then it is before committee. Nope.
Councillor Jackson is waving his hand.
He's moving it, and he has a question.
No, moving it.
No question, just moving it. Got it. And the seconder is, thank you, Councillor Fang. And it's before committee for a vote. Getting good at mind reading from back here. And that carries, thank you. Committee members were on 11.3, which is updated waterworks bylaw PW 23071. Again, Director of Water and Wastewater Operations, Shane McCauley. You could give us a quick overview, and then council or committee members, a mover and seconder, please. So over to you, Director.
Thank you, through the chair. This report, I just want to take a quick moment to recognize the staff that worked on both these bylaws, but this one in particular, this bylaw is 39 years old and it hasn't had a fulsome rewrite since that time. And there has been a significant amount of work to modernize the bylaw, to put in a user guide to make it easier for the public to utilize. And it's also now brought us to the point where we have, we'll have enforceable fines that will help us to administer the bylaw. So Just want to recognize there was a ton of work that went into this by our staff and other divisions to come up with this bylaw that we're very proud of.
Great. Thank you. And it's moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Taddison. Thank you both. Any questions on the report on this much needed update of a 39-year-old bylaw? Seeing nobody on the speakers list, we will move to vote. And that carries on to 11.4, award of request for tender C11-45-23 for the operation, maintenance, removal, and disposal services for the City of Hamilton's household hazardous waste depots, BW report 23072. We have Director of Waste Management Services, Angela Story, who will provide a brief overview, and then I'll need a mover and seconder. So get ready to mime again.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Good afternoon, Angela Story, the Director of Waste Management. So I'd like to provide an introduction to today's report regarding the operation of the city's 3 hazardous waste depots located at each of our community recycling centres. As some of you may recall, in July 2022, Council approved the recommendations in report PW 22059 to continue operating the hazardous waste depots following the transition to extended producer responsibility. Under the regulation, only 14 of the 58 hazardous materials accepted at our depots were deemed designated and would be eligible for funding to continue to accept them. As such, the 2022 report also recommended and was approved to continue accepting both designated and non-designated materials at the depots. As the current contract with the operator is expiring at the end of 2023, staff from Waste Management and Procurement released a request for tender for our next contract to begin in January. Only one compliant bid was received in response to the tender, and as with most contracts lately, the costs, as you will see in the report, are significantly higher than our cost to operate the depots today. The current contract began in 2015, so we were expecting the costs would be higher than they are today. The cost of this contract is approximately $1.58 million higher than our current contract. It's $2.23 million that we're requesting today, and that's up from $0.78 million. You will see in the report that the costs are a combination of fixed and variable costs. The fixed costs of approximately $1 million are related to operators, technicians, and a shared supervisory staff member being physically on site managing the depots. The variable costs of approximately $1.32 million are projections based on the quantities we expect to receive of each of the non-designated materials that are collected at the depots. The contractor will not invoice for designated materials under the contract, as these are the materials that are funded under the extended producer responsibility model. Staff's recommendation is to continue the program as it is offered today to ensure residents have a place to take their hazardous materials to have them disposed of properly and safely. We're also recommending that we continue to push the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks to ensure more non-designated materials are moved to the designated materials list, which in turn will reduce the cost to the city to manage these hazardous materials at our depots. Today I have Rob Connolly with me, who manages the program, and between Rob and I, we will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that overview, Director. Okay, first up, I need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Pauls, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Beattie, thank you. And then speakers list is open, and we have Councillor Pauls up first.
And thank you through the chair. The cost has gone up, obviously, since 2015, and has gone up quite a bit. But I'm just wanting to know, through you, Chair, to staff, what is a non-designated and a designated product? Can you tell me the difference?
For sure, through the chair. So I mentioned in my opening that there are 14 designated items on the list, and that would be 44 non-designated items on the list. So an example of a designated material, which is designated under the regulation, so the province has designated it, would be things like antifreeze, dry cell and rechargeable batteries, mercury switches, nitrogen, oil filters, pesticides, propane tanks, gas cylinders, methane, paint, and thermostats. On the non-designated list, I won't read them all because there's 44, but acids and bases, aerosols, chemicals, compressed gas like expandable foam spray, driveway sealer, fertilizers, flammable organics, fuel and gasoline, grease, kerosene, medications, oven cleaner, etc. So when we looked last year for our report, we identified the volumes or the quantities of these non-designated materials that we were accepting, and it was quite significant. So our concern is if we weren't accepting the non-designated materials under the regulation, that they would get into our water systems, they would come to our landfill. We had a fire just a couple of weeks ago because some chemicals in a garbage bag, caught part of the landfill on fire. So we want to keep them safely and properly handled as best as we can. Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, through the chair, how can we get the non-designated chemicals to the designated? How do we approach the province to say they fit under one category, not that one? Is there?
Yeah, through the chair. So what we have been doing is we sit on a number of industry associations, whether it's Municipal Waste Association, the Ontario Waste Management Association, and so we're working with all of the other municipalities that find themselves in the same boat. Realistically, extended producer responsibility, the general concept of that is that your program should be covered by the producers that make those materials, and we want to continue to work with the province until all of those items have made it over to the designated list.
Thank you for that. And I just want to, through the chair, can you repeat the cost in 2015 and the cost now so we can all be aware of how much it has increased?
Yep, through the chair. So the cost right now in 2023 is $0.78 million. And that is inclusive of funding that we've received from the province for the designated items that are on the list today. The cost based on the tender that we have received is $2.32 million. And that also is inclusive of not paying for designated. So the $2.32 million is to operate with staff at the depots, that is fixed, and the projected volumes and quantities of the materials on the non-designated list.
Thank you for that, and we're listening very careful of the prices that have gone up. I mean, this is a big increase, and I look at it from 2015 to now. So, yeah, thank you for that report.
Thank you. I see nobody else is on the speakers list, so it's been moved and seconded. And before committee to vote. Thank you, that carries. On to 11.5, I am going to ask for Councillor Taddison as the mover and Councillor Kretsch as the seconder. It's the Accessible Transit Services Review Subcommittee Report 23-001 of June 29th, 2023. Any questions or discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. And that carries on to motions. First up is 12.1, road resurfacing on First Road West from Isaac Brock Drive to Brownhaven Drive in Ward 9. Councillor Beattie, if you could please introduce your motion as well as your seconder, please.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I'm bringing this motion forward on behalf of my colleague Brad Clark from Ward 9, who doesn't sit on the committee, seconded by Councillor Tom Jackson. Whereas First Road West from Highland Road to Isaac Brock Drive was resurfaced back in 2018 by engineering to extend the roadway life expectancy and not continued north of Isaac Brock Drive because of upcoming development work. And whereas First Road West from Isaac Brock Drive to Brandhaven Drive, Ward 9, is optimal for road resurfacing to extend the life of the roadway and therefore improve service levels and reduce maintenance costs. Therefore, be it resolved that A, the Transportation Division be directed to resurface the road and associated concrete works on First Road West between Isaac Brock Drive to Brandhaven Drive, and B, that all costs associated with the road resurfacing scope of work be funded from the Ward 9 minor maintenance accounts 403-191-1609, $69,704 and 4023-11609, $230,296 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $300,000, with construction anticipated to be completed in 2024, and that C, the mayor and city clerk be authorized to direct and execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city's solicitor.
Thank you. I don't see a speaker's list or anybody indicating on the speaker's list. So it is before committee for vote. Carries on to 12.2. Thank you, committee. Is Parkette at 505 Beach Boulevard, Hamilton, Ward 5. Councillor Francis, please introduce your motion and your seconder, please.
Thanks, Chair Nan. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Beatty. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to add the creation of a parkette at 505 Beach Boulevard to work plans to start in 2024 at a cost of $57,853 to be funded from the Hamilton Beach Park Reserve, and B, that the General Manager of Public Works be authorized and directed to approve and execute any and all required agreements and ancillary documents in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor related to the creation of parkette at 505 Beach Boulevard, Hamilton. Just to speak to this really quickly, I originally had this motion in a previous GIC meeting as both a naming and the creation of a parkette. I didn't mean to cause any confusion over this. It's more appropriate to deal with the creation of the parkette here at Public Works and then the naming separately at the facility naming subcommittee. This parcel of land is essentially an unofficial park or parkette at the moment. It's nice open green space with mature trees. By using reserve funds, we will officially finish this space. These upgrades will make the community feel more complete and enjoyable. My beach community has been asking for this land to be tidied up, and this motion seeks to do this. This community has also been asking to name this parkette after Jim Hallett, who passed away in April, and he was a well-known and well-respected public figure and a longtime beach resident and environmentalist. The Hamilton Beach Community Council has formally sent correspondence endorsing the naming of 505 Beach Boulevard be named the Jim Hallett Parkette. The family has also expressed great appreciation for this naming suggestion. I will be bringing the naming of this parkette, as I said, to the facility naming subcommittee, where the next scheduled meeting is not until the winter, and I'll seek support at that committee at that time. Looking for Public Works support today, committee support today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Francis. Speakers list is open. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, it's before committee for vote. And that carries. Thank you. On to notices of motion. We have 13.1 Remembrance Day crosswalk designed for Stony Creek Saltfleet Memorial and at other memorial locations in the city. Councillor Beatty, is this remaining as a notice of motion?
Yes, Chair, given the fact that we have about 362 days to figure this out, I thought I would leave it as a notice of motion, but I am thankful to staff for bringing it forward and somewhat timely in the fact that Remembrance Day was 2 days ago. Did have the opportunity to speak about the history of the Stony Creek Memorial and look forward to bringing this forward at the future Public Works Committee.
The December 4th Public Works meeting. Okay, thank you. Next, we have 13.2, which is funding of water service installation for a community garden located at 200 Jones Road in Stony Creek in Ward 10. On this one, Councillor Beattie.
Yes, Chair, and through you, I would like to waive the rules of order to allow the introduction of the motion. Reason being that we have a limited window of opportunity before we have a hard freeze to make this installation to ensure the success of the rebooted community garden. I'll speak to that. I want to bring the motion forward and hoping for the support to waive the rules on this.
Great. And your seconder for waiving the rules?
Councillor Cassar.
Thank you. So first on waiving the rules, committee members.
Sure.
That carries. Next, if you could please introduce your motion and your seconder.
Thank you, Chair. Moved by myself, and my seconder is going to be Councillor Cassar. I'll skip the whereases and go right to the therefore be it resolved. The installation of the water service from the Municipal Service Center building to the new community garden located at 200 Jones Road at a cost of $11,696 in funding allotment from the following: one-time development commitment not to be, sorry, I said development commitment. That word does not exist on this letter. Let me start again. Item 1. A one-time commitment not to exceed $5,000 from the Neighborhood Development 2023 operating budget, ID 624023, and a one-time upset limit, including contingency of not to exceed $6,696 from the Ward 10 non-property tax revenue account 3301609610, and upon I think that's it. That's the whole motion. I did much better with the Ward 9 motion. Maybe I should stick to doing Brad's motions. If I may speak to it.
Sure.
What this basically is in a nutshell for the benefit of committee. The Stony Creek Community Garden at 200 Jones Road is the municipal address. It's located directly adjacent behind the former the former City Hall, Stony Creek City Hall, now the Stony Creek Community Civil Center at 777 Highway 8. The building behind Old City Hall, as I refer to it, was the Kiwanis building. It was originally constructed as the Salt Fleet Township Police Station and was demolished this year due to several health and safety concerns. In its place, we actually hope to move the garden onto the footprint of the former Kiwanis building, the former police station. And of course, without water, there is no garden. And the building itself provided the water to the former gardens, which were located a little bit to the north on the same property at 200 Jones Road. So it's kind of two-part. We're redesignating the former footprint of the previous Kiwanis building as the new gardens, and then with this narrow window of opportunity that we have before the first hard frost to get in there and extend a water service to make this viable. And I will note that the community garden is not operated for at least a year. I believe it's been a little longer, and I've been working with city staff, and through my office, we've taken this on as a project to reboot the community garden. It's also incredibly timely, if you will, because the Stony Creek Food Bank has moved into the adjacent building at 777 Highway 8, and then the back door of the food bank literally looks right out at this new community garden space. So a lot of things are going to line up, I think, very nicely for the community. We've had tremendous interest expressed to my office in participating, and hopeful to get this work done ASAP in anticipation of rebooting the gardens next year.
Thank you. We do have two speakers on the speakers list. First up, we have Councillor Danko, followed by Councillor Crutch.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I fully support the initiative. I'm really grateful that Councillor Beattie has brought this forward. It sounds like a very worthwhile project. No concern there. I do have some concern about the funding and how the funding is allocated. So I see this as mainly a ward initiative. It's not a citywide staff initiative. And typically when there's been capital expenditures, the capital costs are from ward-specific funds, and then the operational costs are then absorbed by the corresponding departmental budget. So in this case, we're asking committee and therefore council to approve a $5,000 capital cost to be borne by a citywide operating reserve, and then the balance of $6,696 to be funded from a ward-specific capital reserve. Understanding that councillors representing amalgamated suburbs don't have area-rated funds available for capital, but they do have two capital reserves, the non-property tax revenue reserve, otherwise known as the cell tower fund. The Ward 10 reserve currently has a balance of $325,000. And the minor maintenance reserve for Ward 10 also has a current balance of $613,000. So from my perspective, it would be much more appropriate for the capital work to be funded from a specific ward oriented capital reserve and not from a general operating reserve, because I think if we project this forward, it's simply just a bad precedent to get into if we by motion start allocating operational reserves to ward-specific projects. So in that interest, I'd very respectfully ask the councillor just to simply fund the entire capital cost from the non-property tax revenue account, which, as I said, currently has a balance of $325,000 and could easily cover the full cost that's being requested.
Thank you. So is that a question to the mover?
Yes.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, and through you, completely respectful of the question from the Ward 8 councillor. My understanding is that if the works had come in below the $5,000 threshold, that we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, that it would have been covered by the appropriate department. And it is my understanding that the department, that this is a normal thing for community gardens, but I would have to seek clarification from the bench if my assumption is true. What came back was that the cost is above what they could cover themselves, so I'm simply augmenting that with funds from the cell tower fund to ensure that it gets done. Otherwise, it wouldn't get done. But I would look to the bench to see if this is normal practice, that there are global citywide budgets that support neighborhood gardens across the city.
It's been a mixed bag here historically, but over to staff.
Hi, Jackie Kennedy, Acting General Manager. My understanding from a quick chat with my colleagues on the bench is that this is not a public works account, and so the right folks to answer that are unfortunately not here.
Is that usually a healthy and safe communities? Is that, I'm just trying to figure out which
Sorry, yes, through the chair, I think that is my understanding, is that it would go through healthy and safe communities.
Right.
Oh, wait, hold on. Director Graham has asked to say something.
So through the chair, just for complete transparency, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services, we have in the past, I can think of one example where as part of a park redevelopment, if we were installing a community garden in a park that is designated as a park, we have covered the water servicing costs as part of that redevelopment. However, I know that there are community gardens across the city that may be on city lands but aren't designated parkland. And my understanding is that we have not necessarily funded the water servicing for those instances. So I just wanted to make sure that that exception instance was clear.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess I would lay it out for committee as follows. It was a city decision to demolish the Kiwanis building, not a ward decision to demolish the Kiwanis building. It was the demolition of the Kiwanis building that led to the suspension of the community garden process. And I would follow that same line to say that there could be a perceived responsibility. Then it was a city decision to make that building disappear, and therefore the water service disappear, and this seeks to rectify that with the assistance of the non-property tax revenue account from the ward.
Thank you, Councillor Beattie. Next up, we have Councillor Crutch.
Not sure what my point's going to add to this, but I'm sure some flavor. I'm just not sure what the flavor is, sorry. It's that I'm thinking about community gardens generally, and I just want to, this is a great point you made earlier. There can be no community garden if there's not any water. And I'll tell you, historically speaking in Ward 2, that is the issue, is that we often have community gardens and we don't have any water located on the place for the, I don't care at this moment in time who pays for it, whether it's sitting as a civic asset or seen as a ward asset, but my question is, so I'm not interested in that discussion necessarily, but I'm wondering if the bench could just answer the question about what our process is, and I think you started to get down that road. Like, what do we do? What is our responsibility to do a community garden, right? The word community garden is in itself a weird phrase because it doesn't necessarily apply to the community. Sometimes these are civic community gardens. Sometimes there's someone's random community garden. So, I could think of a great one is, just to give you an example of one to help if it's useful, Shamrock Park in Ward 2, there's a community garden that's kind of on the top of a parking lot that's part of a parkade, underground, that's part of an apartment building. So then we require the owner's permission to then put the water in. Never happened. There's no water. It now arrives in large buckets or something, some situation that no one wants. And so the garden has been defunct and had some issues. So I'm just trying to unpack this. I think your comment is very important, and if we can improve the policy citywide, we should. So I want to know what you have to say about that, Director Graham.
Through the chair, so at the risk of speaking to a program that isn't within my portfolio, based on my experience working in the city and interacting with the folks that run this program, my understanding is that there is an individual staff member that oversees the program. They reside within Healthy and Safe Communities. There is a policy when there is a location anticipated or proposed or existing and they want to make improvements, those requests go through that staff member, and I believe that's what Councillor Beattie has done in this case. When it comes to infrastructure upgrades, that also would be coordinated through that individual in that program. So with the nuance that if it was in a park facility that my staff maintain, I may get involved in assisting with that.
That's good for me. I'll follow up with you offline and just figure out who that person is and do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciating the offline comment. Really rushing, yeah. So there's nobody else on the speakers list. Appreciating the questions and comments thus far. It has been moved and seconded and before committee for approval. And that carries 12-1. Next is our general information and other business. 14.1 are the amendments to our outstanding business list. This includes the joint action by the City of Hamilton and Hamilton Police Services to improve pedestrian safety, as well as the inclusion of the two items I mentioned up front in terms of the two-way conversion Main Street implementation plan and the reassessment of the one-way streets. May I please get a mover and seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list? Thank you, Councillor Alex Wilson, second by Councillor Crutch. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll then move to electronic vote. And that carries. Thank you. And over to adjournment, moved by Councillor Spadafora, seconded by Councillor Tedison. And as you are voting, thank you very much to clerk staff specifically for supporting me to chair virtually today. Thank you also to all the public works staff who prepared our reports that were considered today, as well as for fielding all the questions and providing your overviews. Please vote if you haven't already. Just me? Oh, there it is. It's carried, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Chair.